Bill Sylviano, transcription certificate.
I think, yeah, don't let
We're going to call the meeting to order, please. Lisa, do sunshine notification.
As required by the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting was provided to the Express Times and the Star Ledger on July 23, 2018, and by posting said notice in the municipal building on the same date.
Roll call.
Mayor Barsney?
Here.
Mr. Beam?
Here.
Mr. McCutta?
Here.
Mr. Perone?
Here.
Mr. Spencer? Ms. McManus? Here.
Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, we'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We're hoping to have a good informational session here for everyone. The meeting is going to start with Beth McManus, the Township Planner, who's going to go over about a 40 to 45-minute presentation about affordable housing, where we're at, how we got here, and that type of information. John Drill, the affordable housing attorney for the Township, will be here later. He's going to be available to make some statements, and he will answer questions as well as Beth at the conclusion. We're asking that while Beth is doing her presentation that no one ask questions or interrupt her. Write down your notes or questions as you go. We're not going to take any action tonight on affordable housing, no action on the MF1 zoning ordinance or the affordable housing regulations ordinance. This is an informational meeting only, so no action will be taken. We ask that your questions not be too lengthy, be considered to others who may also want to ask questions, and we ask that you turn your cell phones on to silent. Okay? With that, Beth, will you please start your presentation?
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I hope you all can hear me. If you're having trouble hearing me, raise your hand now. Okay. So thank you very much for the intro, but just to reiterate, my name is Beth McManus. I'm a planner at Park and I work with Greenwich Township for about a decade on various planning projects. Most recently, I've been working with the Land Use Board as well as the Township Committee on developing an affordable housing strategy so that they can have compliance with the Fair Housing Act and the Mount Laurel Doctrine. We're here this evening to explain all things, maybe not quite all things because we only have so much time, but we're here this evening to explain New Jersey's affordable housing system, how Greenwich fits into that, what the township has done, and where it may be going in the future. This evening, we're not here to talk about a specific plan or a specific ordinance. As you heard the mayor say in his introduction, we're here simply for information and for some Q&A from all of you, to me, and the municipal attorney, the land use attorney when he's able to arrive. So with that, I'm going to get going and give the presentation. It is going to start out generally, and then we're going to work our way to more detail how affordable housing pertains specifically to Greenwich Township. So first, the first thing that I think is important for folks to understand is that this is actually a voluntary system in New Jersey. Now that said, most towns choose to participate because the incentives for participation, the incentives for compliance are very strong. Municipalities that participate are generally referred to as participating municipalities. And by participating, what we mean is they are towns, hold on. We're having a, sorry about that, folks. In any case, towns that participate, what that really means is that these are municipalities that have adopted a housing element and fair share plan. This is a master plan element similar to the land use elements, similar to the circulation elements that Greenwich has adopted and municipalities around the state has. But the housing plan specifically identifies the town's affordable housing obligation and how it will be met. Once they adopt that housing plan, it's submitted to, previously it was submitted to one of two parties. The first one is our state agency, the Council on Affordable Housing. Unfortunately, for reasons that we'll hear about in just a minute, COA is no longer available. But when they were in process, municipalities submitted that plan to COA, and they received what's called a substantive certification. And that substantive certification was the stamp of approval by the state agency that says, yes, this town has done what's necessary to meet its affordable housing obligation. Towns had a choice to go to the courts, to go to superior courts to submit that same housing element and fair share plan. And the court would basically serve the same function as COA. They would review the housing plan, presumably approve it, give their stamp of approval, but in this case it was referred to as a judgment of repose. Towns did this because they wanted that all-important immunity from builder's remedy lawsuits. And that is the reason, the threat of builder's remedy is the reason why towns go through this process. And so those non-participating municipalities, those that don't adopt a housing element and fair share plan, those that don't find a way to satisfy its obligation, are at risk for a builder's remedy. And so what is a builder's remedy? Quite simply, it is a type of litigation where a developer most often sues a municipality and states, this town is not providing for its fair share of affordable housing. And that builder's remedy litigation, also referred to as exclusionary zoning, has very serious implications for a municipality. First and foremost, when the developer sues, they're not just simply alerting the judge that the town is not meeting its affordable housing obligation. In fact, they're offering to help the town meet that affordable housing obligation. And they do so by proposing a development. Those developments look different across the state. What might be proposed in Warren County is different than what you might see in Bergen County. However, the thing that ties each of these builder's remedy litigation cases together is that the density, the number of units, the building height is too much for the municipality. The town is uncomfortable with the intensity of development. But unfortunately, those towns that are subjected to the builder's remedy litigation find themselves in a very tough position because being non-compliant with the affordable housing obligation means, and having been subject to this builder's remedy litigation means that the town zoning is effectively overridden. So what does that mean? It means that you could see multifamily housing. It means that you could see tall buildings in a suburban area, in a rural area, and the municipality has little, if no, ability to negotiate or to alter that development proposal. And so as you can see here, this means specifically the town has very limited ability to negotiate density, design, building type, meaning townhouses, apartments, condos, so forth. Unit types, whether they're for sale or for rent, and also circulation and traffic impacts. The municipality's control over the project is fundamentally reduced when they've been subjected to a builder's remedy lawsuit. And so that is why towns choose to participate, so that they can effectively protect their zoning and maintain control over the vision of their community. Next, I want to make sure that everybody understands what affordable housing is, because I think there's a lot of misinformation, and there are various programs of affordable housing throughout the state and throughout the country, federal programs and state programs, but what we talk about here in New Jersey is really quite specific. We have income limits that are set by the state, and they're based on regions throughout the state that include multiple counties. Here in Greenwich Township, you guys are in a region that consists of Essex County, Lawrence County, Warren, and Union counties. And so as you can see up here, this is an example of the income limits. And as you can see, we also break down affordable housing into not just simply affordable, but there are multiple categories, beginning with very low, low income, and moderate income. And And so all of these income limits are derived based on the median income in your case, 4-county region. Moderate income is set at 80% of the region's median income. Low income is set at 50% of the region's median income, and very low income is set at 30% of the region's median income. Every municipality's plan here in New Jersey must include a mix of these incomes. So for example, towns can't simply allow moderate income units. There must be a mix of very low, low, and moderate. And just as a couple examples, I thought, especially for those in the back, I wanted to give a few of these. So for example, if you're a 3-person household, meaning perhaps 2 adults and 1 child, or perhaps 2 children and 1 adult, your maximum income limit to meet moderate income to be eligible for a moderate income unit is roughly $69,000 a year. The maximum income to qualify for a low income unit for that same 3-person household is roughly $43,000 a year. And the maximum income for the very low income unit is roughly $26,000 a year. And while I talk of income limits in terms of their maximums, one thing that's important to understand is that folks qualifying for these units need to not only supply documentation that proves that their income does not exceed the maximum, they also need to provide documentation that demonstrates that they're able to afford the unit. And so as such, households living in, families living in low, moderate, very low income units have to produce the income documentation, their paycheck stubs and so forth to demonstrate that they are indeed able to fulfill the rent or the sale price of the unit. And so here are a couple examples of affordable rents and affordable sale prices. And as you can see from the slide, the range is really quite significant, and that's because I've listed the rents and the sale prices for not only moderate income, but also low and very low income units. So just as an example, a home price to purchase a affordable 2-bedroom house, the sales price would range between approximately $70,000 to $170,000, depending on whether it's a very low, low, or moderate income unit. The rent for a 2-bedroom home would range between roughly $640 a month to roughly $1,300 a month. Again, depending on whether it's very low, low, or moderate income. So now that we've gotten through the basic information, let me explain a little bit about why exactly we're here in New Jersey, not specifically Greenwich just yet. And I'll try not to spend too much time on the details of this history, but I think it's important that folks understand that this is not a new topic for New Jersey and not something that's simply been sprung on Greenwich specifically or Warren County specifically, but instead this is an issue that's been facing the state for decades. So all of this began back in 1975 with the Mount Laurel 1 decision. Very simply, this was a decision that went all the way up to the New Jersey Supreme Court, and this court found that Mount Laurel Township was excluding low and moderate income households through its zoning, that they refused to amend their zoning to permit housing that would be affordable to those with lower means. The decision found that growing municipalities must create opportunities for low and moderate income households. That was followed up with Mount Laurel 2 in 1983. And after quite a bit of confusion in the courts for a number of municipalities, but Mount Laurel again wound up before the Supreme Court. And in that case, the courts took another step forward. And they said, it's not simply that a town has to create opportunities for some nebulous or unknown amount of affordable housing, but instead there was a calculation, there was a specific number that municipalities should be assigned and should have to satisfy. That created, unsurprisingly, that created a lot more chaos in the courts as municipalities were being sued right and left. There were hundreds of lawsuits against municipalities during that time period. At that point, our New Jersey legislature heard the cry and they took action. They adopted the Fair Housing Act in 1985. And what that act did was, it did several things, but most importantly for tonight, it did a few things. It set forth the Council on Affordable Housing, that state agency that I referenced in the early part of the presentation, and they gave COA rules, they gave responsibilities, mainly stating that they should create a methodology that assigned a number to municipalities and set forth rules and procedures for how towns can meet that obligation and get immunity from builder's remedy litigation. That worked relatively well. Not everybody was thrilled, there were lawsuits, but at the end of the day, COA functioned from about 1987 through roughly 1999. And during that time, they created what's referred to as 2 rounds of affordable housing, meaning twice for 2 different time periods. They created an obligation, they calculated the obligation for each town in New Jersey, and they set forth rules that towns should follow to get that immunity from builder's remedy. And so this is just an illustration of those time periods. Like I said, from 87 through 1999. The first round was literally from 87 to 93. The second round was from 93 through 1999. As I said, COA functioned relatively well, and now that we're in the future, what we refer to, and you'll hear me use this term tonight, the first and second rounds are collectively referred to as the prior round. And so municipal obligations, not only here, but around the state, for these 2 rounds are represented as one number referred to as the prior round obligation. After 1999, things went a little haywire at the state. And so we had many efforts for the Council on Affordable Housing to adopt new rules that would set municipal obligations and set forth procedures for towns to follow. They tried in 2004, they tried again in 2008. Both times the rules were overturned by the courts. It eventually made its way to the Supreme Court in 2013. And at that point, the court once and for all invalidated a methodology that COA had tried to adopt that is generally referred to as growth share. I won't get into that because at the end of the day, it's a methodology that the courts have told towns and told the state agencies you may not rely upon. So in 2013, the court finally said no to growth share and directed COA to basically go back to its old set of rules, its old methodology, and come up with a new set of numbers and rules to fit the 3rd round, which at that time began in 1999 and ran through roughly 2018. COA tried. They got close, very close in 2014, to the extent where they even had a board meeting and had a 3-3 tie. But unfortunately, in the face of a tie at this state agency, it means the rules were not adopted. And so COA was unable to fulfill the direction it received from the court. Fair Share Housing Center, a statewide advocacy organization in the state that's been around for many years, has been a party to all of the litigation, at least since 1999, pressing the 3rd round forward. They moved in 2014 to force COA to adopt, or force the state courts to move forward and make municipalities plan for affordable housing. That resulted in 2015, a decision referred to as Mount Laurel 4. And what it basically says is that towns, you can no longer wait for the state agency to issue rules and to issue numbers to you. This is going to have to be done by the courts. They found that COA was a moribund state agency, and that's why throughout this whole process, you've probably not heard a lot about municipalities interacting with COA. It's all about interacting with the courts. And that's because, quite frankly, that's the only option anymore. That option to get substance certification is over. Now we must proceed through the courts for judgment proposed if you want that protection for builder's remedy litigation. And so in 2015, that kicked off a new wave of lawsuits referred to as declaratory judgments, motions for declaratory judgments. And what that really means, technically a town is suing itself and going before court. More practically, what it means is the town is basically raising its hand to Superior Court and saying, "Dear Judge, I want to be compliant. I don't want to be subjected to builder's remedy litigation. Let's work together, find out what our number is, and how to satisfy it." And that's what Greenwich Township did. There were, I think, over 300 towns that filed for declaratory judgment, so that's more than half of the state. And those towns that didn't file, not exclusively, but a lot of times there are municipalities that are, for example, entirely within the Highlands Preservation Area, or entirely within the Highlands Preservation Area, or perhaps very urban areas. Most suburban and rural towns filed for declaratory judgment, just like Greenwich Township did, because preserving their zoning is important to them. And so Greenwich did that, and that's really what kicked off the process that we're in now, where we work with the courts, we work with Fair Share Housing Center in ways I'll go through in just a minute, to establish an affordable housing obligation, and to move forward with adopting a plan and getting that all-important protection. Also important is that this is not Greenwich's first time dealing with this. The township actually has a long history of compliance with its affordable housing obligation, beginning back in 1990 with the first round, when the township got substance certification. They did so again in 1998. And this township tried in 2005 and in 2010 to adopt a housing plan that corresponded to COA's rules that were then later overturned. Despite the township's best efforts, and like a lot of other municipalities around the state, Greenwich's housing plans from 2005 and 2010 that were submitted to the court were never reviewed, were never approved by the state agency. So as I said, in 2015, hearing the Mount Laurel 4 decision came out, the township went ahead and filed for declaratory judgment to begin this process of protected zoning. In 2017, we reached a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, and in 2018, we adopted a housing plan. The settlement agreement is, and I'll go through the details of that in just a minute, but the background, the reason why municipalities, most towns, are actually settling with Fair Share Housing Center, I think the number is roughly 200 to 300, if I had to state round numbers. So the majority of towns have found a way to settle. Fair Share Housing Center is in every single declaratory judgment case. They're not invited. It's not a matter of the municipality reaching out to them as a party and saying, let's do this together. They are essentially an automatic party for every single case, and that is because of their participation through this process. It is because they brought that Mount Laurel decision they brought to the Supreme Court that Mount Laurel 5 decision that was eventually decided. As a result of that role, as a result of their advocacy, and as a result of them calculating municipal affordable housing obligations that they are pressing the courts on, they are a party to this case. So municipalities that file for declaratory judgment really have two choices for figuring out their obligation. The first one is to seek a settlement with Fair Share Housing Center. And that settlements typically go as Fair Share has calculated a number. They may be willing to offer a discount. They may be willing to offer concessions to municipalities who can find a way to settle with them. And the settlements include not only the affordable housing obligation, but preliminarily how it will be satisfied. Those towns that don't settle are then required to go through a trial process where the town brings its experts to discuss their methodology for determining the affordable housing obligation, and Fair Share will obviously bring their experts who will argue for how the obligation should be calculated. That process has been completed in one county that had two towns that were unable to settle, and that's Mercer County. Just as an example of the expertise and the depth of these trials, this Mercer County trial took more than 40 days of actual trial time before the judge. And so the process for determining a municipal obligation, unfortunately, is incredibly complicated with, I think, 21 steps, and this judge, God bless her, went through every single step with each expert to render her decisions. And so those, as I said, those are essentially the two choices. In this case, Greenwich Township chose settlement because it felt it had a number that would potentially be better than would have been decided by the courts. And also because, quite frankly, settlement ends the litigation a lot faster and can be a lot less expensive because you're able to settle more quickly than going through weeks of trial before a judge. Now, when we talk about the obligation, each town in New Jersey has three components that you see up on the screen. The first one is the rehabilitation component, the second is the prior round, and the third is the third round obligation. The rehabilitation obligation is the number of deficient households in the community deficient housing units occupied by low and moderate income households. It is an estimate based on census and American Community Survey data. The rehabilitation obligation is sort of a different animal when we talk about satisfying obligations. It has a different role, it has different rules that apply to it. This evening, we're going to focus primarily on what's referred to as the new construction obligation, and that's the prior round and the third round obligation. We call it new construction because generally it's the number of new affordable units that must be created in the municipality in order to satisfy the obligation. So as I said, the prior round was for the time period 1987 through 1999. The third round has been determined to start in 1999 and run through 2025. And so what we see here is a very long third round period. And that's part of the reason why municipalities facing this challenge today are facing very large third round obligations. Because we're no longer talking about, in the prior round, a 12-year period, which was, even then, it was broken up into two rounds of compliance. Now we're talking about a 26-year time period from 99 through 2025. In addition to simply meeting the overall number, overall prior round, and the overall third round obligations, there are a number of micro requirements within them, including, for example, 25% of the obligation must be rental housing. 50% of the obligation must be family housing. And by family, I don't mean literally occupied with an adult and children, but simply not restricted to a senior, not restricted to someone with special needs, just simply available to a family. No more than 25% of the obligation can be met with senior or age-restricted housing. Also, 50% of the affordable units must be low income, and that's composed of 37% low income and 13% very low income. The remaining 50% may be moderate income. And so what we see here are examples of our affordable housing calculations. So at the top is that rehabilitation obligation. And actually, in each of these, you can see from light to dark, moving from left to right, the lighter number is calculated by eConsult. They are a consulting group that was hired by a consortium of municipalities, including Greenwich, to calculate municipal obligations and to advocate on the part of municipalities before court. The middle number, well, eConsult is on the left. On the right, on the far right, is Fair Share Housing Center, that statewide affordable housing advocacy group that I talked about. In the middle is the affordable housing obligation found by the judge in Mercer County. Remember how I said this judge went through more than 40 days of trial? Well, while her decision is only applicable to those two towns that were before her, that happens to be West Windsor and Princeton, in order for her to calculate the obligation for just those two towns, she actually is required to start at the state, because this is not an obligation that trickles up from the municipalities. It's actually an obligation that starts at statewide projection and then is applied to each town in the state. And so, in order to get there, she started at the top. And if you read her decision as now 3 experts have done and calculate how municipal obligations should be done throughout the state, what you yield for Greenwich is an obligation of $299. And so, oddly enough, the judge's decision is actually higher than the calculation that Fair Share Housing Center had done for Greenwich. So there are a lot of ways to satisfy the affordable housing obligation. There are 2 primary ways that are able to meet a large affordable housing obligation. And that's listed at the top, referred to as large scale. And so they include municipal-sponsored development, also referred to as 100% affordable housing, and inclusionary housing. I'm going to go through these in quite a bit of detail, but just briefly, municipal-sponsored construction is an all-affordable housing project that the municipality partners with an affordable housing developer on, so as to create the number of units. And so they are a partner for the approval process and work with the developer to ensure that those units are built. Inclusionary housing is more of a market-based solution where the town simply zones to create a mix of market rate and affordable housing and allows developers to come forward and make applications for site plan approval. Now there's some intricacies in both of those that I'll go through, but that's a basic definition of them. For your smaller scale options that can satisfy perhaps a handful of units each at best, and I say that because for the most part, most of these are quite expensive, if I'm honest. And also they have limited applicability. So if you remember, as I said, senior housing or age-restricted housing, there's a maximum of 25%. And so we've got to consider that a small-scale option because it's limited in your ability to meet more than 25% of your obligation. Also, assisted living. Assisted living counts as senior units. And so those 2 have limited applicability. Other programs include group homes, also referred to generally as special needs housing. And so group homes are typically, but not always, they're typically for those with developmental disabilities. It's usually in a single family home with anywhere from 3 to 5 bedrooms occupied by those with special needs. Market to Affordable is a program where the municipality goes out, purchases a market rate home at the market price, and then resells it at the affordable price. If you remember from the earlier slide where I listed those sales prices, those become very important because the delta between the market price and the affordable price becomes the municipal subsidy or the municipal contribution necessary to create each unit. And then lastly for this list is the accessory apartment program. That's a program where homeowners are allowed to create an additional dwelling unit on their property, often referred to as a mother-in-law unit or a garage apartment, and then that unit would be rented to a lower moderate income household, although just a small point, while we often refer to them as mother-in-law apartments, your mother-in-law cannot live there. They have to be affirmatively marketed. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit more detail about these 2 large-scale choices, municipally sponsored and inclusionary housing. So, as I said in the definition, most importantly, the biggest difference is that municipally sponsored, all of the units are affordable. Maybe there's a manager's unit on the site, depending on how big the project is, but basically they're all affordable. In inclusionary housing projects, you're generally going to have a mix of either 15 or 20% of the units as being affordable. The remainder have to be market rate. And so for rental projects, the set aside is typically 15%, and for sale projects, the set aside is typically 20%. An inclusionary housing project is funded by the developer. They're responsible for buying the land, for building the units, and so forth, for raising their own private capital, however they see fit. Municipally sponsored construction, on the other hand, is required to be heavily subsidized, typically by federal, state, and municipal funds, depending on the sources of revenue that they're eligible for and the sources of revenue that they are able to receive. And so, more specifically, those funds are most often in New Jersey, and we're talking about 100% projects that are, I would say more than 20 units. They're most often funded with a program called the Federal Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. And you'll hear that referred to tonight perhaps as tax credits. It's all this program. It provides a substantial amount of the funding for municipally sponsored projects around the state. However, the risk with municipally sponsored projects, while developers are always looking to get these tax credits as well as the supplementary funds that may be available from the state or even the county or the municipality, the risk is that the developer will not receive this primary source of funding. And that's a risk not just to the developer because of their lost efforts, but it's perhaps more so, at least all of you, it's a risk to the municipality. And that is because towns that commit to doing a municipally sponsored project, commit to doing so in court via a settlement agreement or commit to it via a housing plan, are then required to implement their plan. It's understood when a municipality plans for a 100% project that the funding is necessary. And so if they commit to this project, if the outside sources of funding are not received, the municipality is then called upon to fulfill the gap funding. And that gap funding can be millions of dollars to construct the units. And so those towns that, and many do, embark on a municipally sponsored project are wise to think through the implications of how well the project is funded and what the likelihood of funding is. So some of the site concerns for, regardless of whether we're talking about municipally sponsored or inclusionary housing projects, we have to find a site that is fundamentally suitable or realistically developable. And that means a number of things that I'll go through, but at the end of the day, it means that the site has to be developable for what's planned. And that means that it's got to have public water and sewer. And that's important because when we talk about inclusionary housing and 100% housing or municipally sponsored projects, the density necessary to achieve these is too great for septic systems. It is not cost effective. It is not, a developer would not receive funding if they had to build affordable housing units on individual septic systems. And I say that because quite frankly, it's just too expensive to build an individual home and an individual septic system. So any developer seeking those low-income housing tax credits is going to need to find a site that has access to public water and sewer. Similarly, inclusionary housing projects. The standard set forth in COA's rules is a minimum density of 6 units an acre. And so 6 units an acre is simply too tight. The lots are too small to accommodate individual septic systems. And so inclusionary housing sites that towns may seek to zone must be served or must have access to public water and sewer. Additionally, it seems obvious, but the sites need to have road access. You can't choose a site that's entirely landlocked. It's got to have access to a public street. Additionally, it's got to have access to appropriate uses. Think about other residential uses, perhaps farmlands, perhaps commercial properties. So any land that might be appropriate, generally speaking, any land that might be appropriate for residential development might be considered for affordable housing development because that too is a residential use. Also, the site has got to be approvable by outside agencies. So that means that to the extent that DEP permitting is needed, that's got to be possible. To the extent that Highlands Council permitting is necessary, that has to be possible. And the site has to be relatively free of environmental constraints. Not quite literally free in the sense that there can't be any wetlands on the property, for example, but the site has got to have adequate developable land to be able to provide for the project as planned. And then lastly, for municipally sponsored construction, the municipality has to have control over the land. And what that means is that the town either needs to own the land or it's got to have a contract to buy. And that is because in order for a town to make that commitment that they're going to do the municipally sponsored construction, as I said, where they partner with that developer, they've got to have the ability to do that partnership. And that means that somebody involved in this partnership needs to own the land. Sometimes that does mean that the 100% developer owns it, but the vast majority of the time, the town is either working with land they previously purchased or land that their purchase is ongoing for the explicit purpose of providing affordable housing. And one more slide on the differences between municipally sponsored and inclusionary. The process for identifying an inclusionary site is, quite frankly, to identify it, to work out the zoning, adopt the zoning, and potentially provide a pilot agreement. It occurs in some inclusionary housing cases, but not all. I simply wanted to identify it as something that happens with inclusionary housing. It depends on the conditions of the project. Municipally sponsored projects, on the other hand, have a number of additional steps that are necessary. Of course, you need to identify the site. You need to zone the site just as you would for an inclusionary housing project. But beyond that, because the municipality is partnering with the developer, the town then needs to select the developer if that hasn't already happened. But most of the time, the town identifies the site and issues a request for proposals or a request for qualifications, and that's simply a notice to qualified developers to submit their ideas. The town would then review their ideas or their qualifications, would select that developer, and would enter into a developer's agreement that would state each party's roles and responsibilities. Additionally, the developer, once selected, they're going to pursue those low-income housing tax credits. Because as I said, that's a funding source that the vast majority of developers are utilizing for a larger project. In order to receive those tax credits, the developer is going to be required to have a pilot. It's simply a necessary component for any developer to receive tax credits. And let me just identify, a pilot is a payment in lieu of construction, for those that may not know. And that is municipal revenue received based on a contract rather than simply the value of the land, rather than the taxable value of the land. Additionally, the developer is obviously going to have to secure those outside sources of funding, and the municipality will have to support the developers doing so in terms of support letters to the state agency requesting funding. They'll also have to support the developer in seeking any outside agency approvals, like, for example, DEP or the Highlands. And then lastly, because the municipality is partnering with this developer, the municipality is obligated to push and to see that that developer begins their construction within 2 years of having the settlement agreement approved. Meaning that they not only need to push for the actual start of construction, but they need to work with the developer to ensure that they do all of the above steps in a timely manner, to make sure they get the pilot done, to make sure they get the funding done. And included in this process is also site plan approval. So the town is required to, as I said, partner with the developer in each of these steps. So just as a quick reminder, when we talked about the obligation, so the rehabilitation obligation for Greenwich ranged between 0 and 8. The prior round obligation is 41 units. And as I said, co-ops generally function during the prior rounds. During that functioning period, they assign Greenwich and every other town in the state an obligation. Greenwich's obligation for that prior round is 41 units. That number is not subject to the ongoing litigation. It is simply set, and it's, I don't know how I'll say it, it's not subject to the ongoing litigation. It's really only the third round that we're talking about. The third round obligation ranged between 82 and 299, with the Mercer County decision weighing in at 299. However, Greenwich, as I said, we went through the settlement agreement process. And so what was determined is the rehabilitation obligation was 8 through that settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center. Our obligation for the prior round is 41 because as I said, that really wasn't subject to negotiation. But the third round obligation is set at 204 units. And so I think that's really important because Greenwich, I think unlike a lot of towns around the state, has a settlement agreement number that is significantly lower than the number found by Mercer County. There are a lot of towns out there that have a Mercer County number that is actually lower than the number that they settled on, or perhaps similar. But here in Greenwich, we're roughly 90, 95 units less than that number that had been determined by that judge, albeit not your judge, but by a judge that took great care in reviewing the methodology. So now I'm going to go through what was included in the township settlement agreement. Now, before I do this, I just want to remind everybody that we're here tonight as a Q&A for information, because the township is considering options for how to meet this obligation. But I also want folks to understand where we are today, and that is that we currently have a settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center that states the town will satisfy the following obligation. That said, that we are in negotiations to let Fair Share Housing Center and the court know that we're considering other options so that we can seek some flexibility, if appropriate, to find a plan that works better for this community. That said, the prior round obligation is fully satisfied. It's satisfied with 41 units at the Greenwich Chase project. These are existing affordable housing units that are in place. We're able to use those to meet the entirety of the prior round obligation. We're also able to carry over a number of those into the third round. So, 21 of 70 in the prior round, we're going to use the remaining 29 of 70 in the third round. And so those are surplus credits, essentially, that give us a step forward in meeting that third round obligation. Additionally, the township has one existing group home operated by the Ark of Warren. That's an existing group home with 3 bedrooms. We're taking 3 credits for those. Additionally, the township has a municipally sponsored construction project, which I think is why everybody got noticed and animated about this process. The Dumont Road property had been identified to create approximately 121 affordable units on it, and that project would fulfill the entirety of the 204-unit third round obligation. And so, in addition to what you see on this table, it's not simply the number of units, but we also have bonus credits in that middle column that I'll go through, because towns that take certain actions are eligible for bonus credits. So if you remember from one of the earlier slides, I said the town has a 25% rental obligation. And that's true, and this pertains to that rental bonus issue. So 25% of the units must be for rent. However, code's rules actually permit an extra credit for each of those units referred to as a rental bonus. However, in order to get that rental bonus, there must be what's referred to as a firm commitment. And that firm commitment has to take the form of a commitment from somebody that is taking responsibility for that project. Meaning, if it is a municipally sponsored project, the town can claim the rental bonus credits because the town is a partner in that project with the developer and has the power to ensure that those units are for rent. Alternatively, in the case of an inclusionary housing project, for an example, if the developer or the property owner provides a commitment in writing that says, I commit, essentially, to doing rental units on the project, then the town is able to generate rental bonus credits because there's an assurance that the zoning on the site will create rental housing. And the reason why that's important is because in New Jersey, we don't have the ability to zone for sale or for rent. You simply zone for housing type, whether it's a single-family unit, a townhouse, a multifamily unit. But whether those units will be built for sale or for rent is the prerogative of the developer. Unless, in this case, for affordable housing, we have what's referred to as a firm commitment for rental housing.
Are you telling me to go with are you ordering
The rental bonuses are important because, as I said, they generate extra credits per unit. So as you can see in this table, I've shown 2 calculations for how this township might get to its 204-unit obligation with and without rental bonus credits. At the end of the day, with a firm commitment, this municipality is able to get 51 bonus credits. The first 3 are going to be from the existing house units at the group home. Those are existing rental units that we can take bonus credits for. In order to get a firm commitment, or if we get a firm commitment, we would be eligible for an additional 48 units, 48 credits to meet that obligation. Okay, so let's fast forward to a little bit about the process of where we are. As I said, the municipality entered into a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center. This occurred in September 2017. The court approved that settlement agreement in December 2017. The municipality adopted a housing element and fair share plan in June of this year. And that is the first step required for implementation of the settlement agreement. The next steps are governing body, in this case, Township Committee endorsement of the plan, which is essentially a recommendation to send that plan on to the court for their review and approval. And next, the township is required to begin to adopt the ordinances necessary for implementing the agreement. In this case, most importantly, that included the MF1 ordinance that was originally scheduled for a public hearing this evening. Once the housing plan is adopted, it's then submitted to court for a compliance hearing, and that is that hearing where the judge would review and approve, and presumably put a stamp of approval and give the town a judgment of repose. That has not happened here because we're, as I said earlier, as the mayor said, we're here to consider additional options and to hear from the community. As I said, at that compliance hearing, when Greenwich gets there, we'll present the plan to the court, hear any comments from folks involved in the case, and the judge will presumably issue that judgment of repose, which will give us immunity from builder-friendly litigation for the entirety of the third round. After that is simply the on-the-ground implementation of the plan, and that is having the site or sites developed, and then ensuring continued compliance. So, for example, ensuring that any affordable units built remain affordable and that are occupied by eligible households. And so thank you very much for listening to my long presentation at Hot Room. I think we're ready to
You okay? You need a break. John's taking a break here, he just drove an hour. I'll open it up to any committee person. If you have anything you want to ask of Beth or anything for clarification before we open the public? You good? Yep. You good?
Thank you. I'm good. I thought it was a great presentation. Great job. I mean, we've seen it before, but it broke up in pieces, and it was nice to see it all in one package.
Okay. Is Beth going there?
That's okay also.
Well, we can take a break if you want to stick up and stretch your legs or something. So.
It's a recommendation, but you'd like that sound here sooner. Or ask the mayor here, please.
Does it have air? It is on.
Italian ice truck, I was wondering if we could Rita's, hired Rita's to come in. Would have made a fortune.
Everybody good in the back section, just waiting for him to come back out.
Mike for the stand.
There's one here. There's John, and one over John. Got one? Yeah, sure.
Okay, we have a mic in the middle aisle here. Come up and ask your questions. Starting now. You need to state your name and address for the record.
Hi, John Mandeville, 280 Yvonne Way, Stewartsville. Okay, so for those of you who aren't involved, this has not been the most transparent process, no matter what they may say. I don't even have to say anything. They've been planning this since 2015. People on Yvonne Way got there since 10 days prior to June 20th, or 21st, when they were actually called to vote. Let it be noted that not all of them showed up. Only 3 of them did. We were going to meet last week actually. Once again, not all of them showed up, and they held us all outside for 95 minutes while they had an executive session. So it's not the most transparent process, no matter what they say. I got more details. If you want to know, 2014 architectural diagrams in the whole place. Let's talk about money. 2015, you increased school taxes because of town mismanagement of money by 16.6%. Now please note all of these questions in a row because I want to know very specific answers on where all this went. Where did our money go? Why didn't you lower taxes in 2016, 17, and now 18 by 16.6%? Where's the money gone? What is it being used for? Why not drop our taxes? Sewage. You tried to up our taxes in 2016 on sewage. Someone on your town council would benefit from that. I believe he has to recuse himself every time a question comes up with this. I'm not going to go into that. Let's talk about why it's not rental versus ownership. Why does it have to be 25 or 100% when the minimum is 25%? How are you going to pay for the school? Okay, so right now the capacity, this is someone on your own town council stating, said we are funded for 700 with a capacity of 1,000. What can we handle for more of that? You know, how are you going to pay for that? What's going to be the impact to utilities, police? Right now we have a voluntary emergency department. How are you going to pay for all of that? You know, where's all this money going to come from without raising taxes? Sewage, roads, where's all this money going to come from? More specifically, since these are going to be moderate to low income, in the past year alone, and these are just major retailers, I don't know the small businesses that closed, but these are the businesses that closed here in Phillipsburg. Sears, Bon-Ton, Staples. We won't even count Toys R Us because they went bankrupt. Where are they going to work? I think someone in your town council said it's ridiculous for someone to have to drive 30 to 40 minutes away to get a job that's minimum wage. So where are they going to work? How are you going to develop? Where is the commercial? Where are you developing all this for these people to get a job? At the end of the day, I want people to know that even if you don't think this is in your backyard, which it is mine, and that's okay, but it's going to impact your houses. When 20 houses go up for sale, everyone's going to be competing against each other. You know, your value in your house is going to drop. And your taxes are going up. So in the end, where did our money go? How are you going to pay for all this? Why not ownership and rental together? And how are you going to handle the school? What if you have to expand the size of the school? Where's all the money going to come from? On me after 4 years of planning.
Okay, you had your time.
I understand that. You had 4 years of planning.
Please address on why rental versus ownership.
Yeah.
As I said, the Council on Affordable Housing rules require that every municipality satisfy at least 25% of its obligation with rental housing. That is why the township's plan includes rental housing.
It's 100%.
And the answer to why not owner and rental together, that's one of the options that's being considered.
And that's okay. But where's our money?
I don't understand it.
And you understand the question? You mismanaged our school money in 2015. You increased taxes by 6%. The town
We
did.
have a Board of Education, we have nothing to do with
It doesn't matter. Our taxes go up.
You're making no sense.
why our taxes not go back down? You understand, I'm not involved with town councils.
Just so everybody knows, the town council only controls like 30% of your total tax increase. So when you see a large tax increase, the town's only responsible for 30% of that. So just so everybody knows.
You're still the public face. Where is it going?
It's all explained every year in the budget. There's a budget
Okay,
document.
where's the budget? You got it?
Yeah, I got it in my pocket.
Questions
Next
related-
question, please.
Wait, just-
You're
questions
taking up
related
time
to
for
the
some
school.
valuable questions. There's people
Look,
have real questions.
I serve on the Board of Education, so I can answer this. You have a question related to your taxes and the portion that's attributable to the school, you go to the Board of Education meeting and you ask them. This township doesn't control the school budget. This committee doesn't control the school budget. The Board of Education does. You want an answer to your question to the school tax, you ask the Board of Education.
Okay, thanks, you're not prepared. Thank you.
Good evening. Constantine Chances, 403 Christian Court. Constantine, C-O-N-S-T-A-N. Chances, C-H-A-N-T-Z-I-S, 403 Christian Court. I'm going to make 3 points. Please listen carefully. The giant has awoken and is not going to go back to sleep. Okay? The giant has awoken and is not going to go back to sleep. I am a resident of this town for the last 15 years, and I'm totally outraged. And I believe I speak for all of these folks. Why am I outraged? I said something last time we met about a week ago. I'll say it again. A decision was made last December by the judge. All of us have been clueless about it. We're just told tonight that I came a little later, forgive me, I had a serious emergency. I believe this is the council we have, right? Okay. I guess my question is valid. That the town made a decision in June as far as how to proceed. So basically here, this meeting is just to inform us what you're going to do, because you already have decided what you're going to do. Yeah.
There's another option.
Yeah, exactly.
There are other options.
Okay. What are they? Okay. This presentation, please let me finish and then we proceed. Okay. So, you folks have to learn how to communicate. Okay? There's one more person sitting here that understands what I'm talking about. That is Mr. Frank. Everybody else, based on my own personal assessment, has no clue. Clueless. Okay? And I just proved to you why I believe you guys don't know how to communicate. And until you prove to us that you learn how to communicate, we're not going to go away. We're going to be in these numbers and double these numbers, okay? And more. And eventually, we might even force you out. Okay? You hear that? We're going to force you out. Okay. Second point. What the residents of this town want, they don't want this presentation we just saw. Okay? This is presentation for the eyes only. Let me tell you what the residents want a presentation about. And I would like to see that soon. As a resident, what I care about is the value of my property today, going forward to the future, and the safety of myself and my loved ones while I live in this town. So I want a presentation about that. I don't want to have a presentation about, you know, the municipal, approach, and is this and is that, and the cost. Yes, that is money. But what about after that? What about all of that has been settled? And these folks that are living next to you, next to me, all of you guys live in town somewhere, I'm sure. Okay? So that is what we want to have an answer to. How will the housing get impacted in the immediate vicinity where those, if that is going to be only one unit of X buildings, whatever you call those. Those are the type of questions we have to discuss. And it looks like the presentation was made as if now we've made a decision, we're going to just plug something down in one spot, and then c'est la vie. You like it, if you don't like it, just open your mouth and it's good for you. Okay, that's basically what you guys are telling us. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. We are going to basically scream like murder here, and we're going to take action. All right? Now, last point, I don't want to take too much time, is about legal counsel. Last week, I believe, right, there was a meeting in the municipal building. I believe it was this fellow that told us that he was one of two or three other attorneys that litigated the case in front of the one of the courts here in the state of New Jersey for signing decision. And he said he lost. They lost. Okay? Is that correct, sir? Somebody made that statement. I know it's correct, right? Okay, so
Who lost?
you were involved with the couple of other fellows. You were involved in a case that was litigated and you guys lost, correct?
I argued Mel.
Sir, you don't have to give the dissertation. Did you guys lose or win? That's all I want to know.
I've been involved probably in 25 cases. Which case?
Okay, thank you. All right. So here's the town has hired an expert, okay, that basically has lost litigating this type of a case. We have hired him to advise us of how we're going to lose the case. Hello, is anybody home? Thank you.
Just for everybody's, on? Anybody hear me? Is this on?
What was the question?
No, I just want to respond about John's. I'd just like to respond about John Drill's credentials. John Drill is one of the foremost experts in the state on affordable housing. If you have a problem with the affordable housing and the decisions that the town made, that's what we're responsible for. He advises us. I have a lot of faith in John. We all know that John is regarded as one of the best land use attorneys in the whole state. So I just want to put that on the record. But at this point, they asked about options. I think it's important that we talk about what are the other options that the town is looking into, because I think people are under the impression that this is a done deal, the current decision that the town put out there.
Do you want to go through what you want to explain?
Yeah. So, John, why don't you do
you want to
that?
stand and wait, or you want to sit down until he goes through his
No, I
instruction?
want to say what I have to
Okay,
say.
great.
Okay, Ms. McManus just took 40 minutes reinforcing my belief that governments in the state of New Jersey are hostile to liberty, ineffectively run, overly expensive, and there is really no benefit to anybody. Hostile to liberty. What you are forcing, and I understand, a judge decided there is a constitutional right. I read the Constitution of New Jersey. I can find no such right enumerated. Okay, it's some judge's idea. Hostile to liberty, it's social engineering at its worst. Okay, and here is one example of the reasons why people are fleeing your state, just like they did in my home state of Illinois, because too high taxes and too much regulation. People are fleeing your state also because of junk like this. I get it, has to be done. At the same time, you folks are elected. In other words, we, the constituents, hire you to do a job for us, specifically the job that we say want to have done. If these rental homes get built on the corner there, you are fired, you are fired, you are fired.
People are interested in the options that the Township Committee is considering at this point. There are three obvious options, and then there are all sorts of permutations, but I'm going to talk about the three obvious options. Option A is the option that right now is subject to that settlement agreement, which is the 100% affordable rental project of 120 units on the Dumont Road site. Option B.
He's just explaining the options.
I'm explaining the options. Option B would be to strike a deal with three developers that are represented by the Florio Carucci law firm, who sent a letter to the Land Use Board, which I discussed with the board in closed session, and I discussed with the Township Committee in closed session, which essentially would be something to the effect that if the township zoned the 3 developer sites, which are on the other side of 78 for warehousing, the potential deal would be that the developer would build all of the affordable housing for the township, half, maybe 61 units at the Dumont Road site, and 60 affordable units on their property. But that takes an agreement between the township and the 3 developers. Option C is a unilateral option that the township could take, which would be to pick one of those 3 developers' sites on the other side of Route 78 and rezone that site for an inclusionary development of enough units so that 20% of them would be, again, 60 affordable units. So there'd be 60 units on that side of 78, on that property, which happens to have sewer. And as Beth said, to be realistic, you need sewer and water. They have sewer and water. It's vacant land. It's near a road and all that, so it would qualify. And then 61 units on Dumont. Now again, there's all sorts of permutations. Those are the 3 options that the township is now considering.
John, could you explain that those options were not known to us prior to June?
So back in 2010, the township was actually in negotiations with one of those property owners to do something very similar, and they were close to having a deal, and the developer decided they didn't want to do that. So that's why there was no other option other than the Dumont Road site, which the township owned. Out of the blue, I got a letter on June 10th from the Florio Carucci law firm saying that,
July 10th.
I'm sorry, July 10th, proposing to have a discussion about this. And so we haven't discussed it yet, but there's a fair share housing center, which again, this man has mentioned, they're not a public agency. They're a nonprofit advocacy agency that represents low and moderate income individuals. We have in fact entered into an amended settlement agreement with them, which is posted on the township's website, which extends the township's dates by which it has to adopt the MF1 ordinance for the Dumont Road site, and it extends it out to November. And the judge has scheduled a case management conference on Monday, July 30th. The developer's attorney's going down there, I'm going there, Fair Share's going to be there, and we're going to discuss the possibility of changing the plan. And again, who knows what's going to happen, but again, there's all sorts of permutations, but those 3 are the most obvious options that could come out of this.
Next question.
Thank you for the clarification, because that moots now half of my points on my paper. So my name is Elizabeth Van Blarcom, V-A-N-B-L-A-R-C-O-M. I'm at 505 Madison Drive. I've been a resident of Greenwich Chase since 2002. I've had children in the school system since 2003. Going back to your exclusive Dumont Road original plan of 144 or 121 family rental units on that street, even knocking that down to 60 units. A few questions. I come to you as a homeowner as well as a professional realtor in this community. The plan that was given to us at a homeowners informational meeting a couple of weeks ago shows 3 points of ingress and egress into that community. That's a road, I've driven kids on that road for 10 years to drop them off during school drop-off times. It's impossible to make a left onto that road at 7:30 in the morning. That road's designed as an access road to a shopping center. Where are those cars going to go if these are family units? You're considering probably more than one car. Most of these folks are working. I don't see where the traffic's going to go. My taxes have gone up over 24% since 2010. as rental units, we are burdening our tax system without the benefit of additional income into that tax system. So this is something that I understand that we need to make compliance with this. I'm a realtor, I do affordable housing. But we need to consider that our taxes have gone up substantially. We are nearing that Hunterdon County cap. I bought my house in 2002 on a 5-year plan, thinking I'm gonna, you know, like all parents, I would much rather my kids go to a blue ribbon school district, although I have no problem with the education my kids got at Warren Tech and at Phillipsburg. But like most parents, I would rather see my kid go to North or Voorhees or some other blue ribbon school. But I'm getting near that Hunterdon tax record, and my kid's going to Peabody. As, although there is no direct correlation between affordable housing and property values, as our taxes increase, our properties are going to become more difficult to sell. We have been in a neutral market since the beginning of the year, averaging 4 to 5 months of income, 4 to 5 months of inventory in our homes. June jumped to 8 months. We're still in a fairly good market in Greenwich. Those taxes start inching up real high, that's going to become a problem for our property values. So these are things that I think the council needs to look at a little more closely. What impact studies have been done on our community, on our wildlife, on our roads? I think we've gone into this a little bit too quickly.
And I hear what you're saying, and we've had the same question. Does that impact have any bearing on the court case? I mean, I'm sure it's been argued.
You just heard her say that she's a realtor. She said there's no correlation between affordable housing and property values.
No direct, but there are indirect implications.
I guess what I'm getting at, your questions are fair, and certainly things that we've all wondered. I don't know that we can even deal with them. We're just forced to do what we got to do. So you have to deal with the impact. So,
but perhaps looking at as large of a rental impact. Again, we're going into
that's why we're trying
a tax on our right.
That's why we're curiosity. It's probably a little peak with the warehousing, and maybe get some rentals out of that with the affordable housing. I don't know, but I'm sure there's going to be residents complaining that has an impact on the town.
There is a response as to the traffic impact.
So in terms of your question about what about the impact studies, for example, traffic, environmental impact, you're right, those have not been done, and I want to be clear that that's not unusual in this process. The way that, whether it's inclusionary or municipally sponsored projects occur, is that if the site is selected, the properties there is then required to go through site plan approval, just like any other project, an office, single-family, market rate project, and so forth. At that point in time, the developer is required to conduct a traffic impact assessment and parking impact assessment that identifies the anticipated traffic trips and how they'll be distributed throughout the community, and if road improvements are necessary to accommodate the project. And similar for environmental impact. At the time that the site plan is done, once the developer understands how the site will be developed, where the buildings and roads or driveways will be laid out, at that point they would conduct an environmental impact assessment, and that would determine what the environmental impact is and if mitigation needs to take place, and then how that mitigation would occur within their project. So the concerns are legitimate, but the timing to get into the details of those impacts are done at the point of site plan approval. But the municipality has a basic understanding of the conditions within the site selected through its master planning process, through the environmental data that's available through various sources. So before a site is selected, towns go through that site suitability criteria that I referenced to ensure that, for example, there's road access and the site is developable in that there are not environmental constraints like wetlands that would literally preclude the development of the affordable units.
So the plan is then modified if it is found that the infrastructure cannot support?
Well, right now,
plan?
there's no plan, but if, for example, there was a site selected and it was thought to be free of wetlands, and a developer came forward and said, oh my goodness, turns out 70% of it is actually wetlands. At that point, the town would have to pivot and amend its plan to find a site that is suitable.
No, sir, you can wait until you come up and ask the question. No, you're gonna have to wait and come back up and ask.
There's a line.
John,
It's not fair to the people who are in line.
John,
I think that hits most of mine, I'm sure I'll have.
Yeah, thanks for, they're good questions, and I hear you. And I think what I'm hearing is, it doesn't really matter what the impact is, we're gonna be stuck with whatever the option is in the end. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what you think you're hearing?
Well, I know we're stuck with affordable housing, that is
Yeah.
the state of New Jersey, that is the way of the world. But
Yeah, that I
I
understand
think
too.
we can do it with a lower impact on our with a lower negative impact on our community.
The plan that you guys have seen is not an official plan,
Oh, I understand.
okay? I mean, that was probably, does it say who prepared
It's a
the plan?
conceptual drawing, I get that.
Okay, so what Ms. McManus said is true. They're gonna have to come in with a traffic study and an environmental impact statement. And for example, let's take the Dumont Road site, which is somewhat close to Route 22. So they're gonna have to come up with the traffic counts. How much traffic is gonna be generated coming in, coming out, what times? Are they gonna have to do an extra lane on Greenwich Street? Is there gonna have to be a traffic light? All those things. And when Beth said, at the time of site plan approval, it's at the time of site plan review. Those things have to be satisfied before the land use board would be legally allowed to grant site plan approval.
In your other plans, are some of those owner-occupied units that would also add to our tax income?
Okay. You're saying that in the other options,
In the other
and
options?
the other options that have some of the units on the other side of 78,
Correct.
are they,
Are some of those owner-occupied
Yes.
or business-occupied that would
Okay.
add to our tax income base, which would lessen the impact on us as homeowners?
let's take a look at option C that I mentioned. Option C is a rezoning of one of the developer's properties on the other side of 78.
Correct.
That particular property would be, let's say, for a hypothetical, would be rezoned to allow 300 units of housing. Most likely, my guess, is either small single-family homes or townhouses. 20% of the 300 would be low and moderate income for sale units. So the 300 would, the 300 minus 60 is 240 would pay taxes like any other, and the low and moderate pay taxes. It's all on assessed value.
Right.
What you're really asking is, what happens to an 100% rental project? And what Beth said before is, technically, they're not paying taxes, but they will enter into a pilot. And so I was late coming out here, but I was listening to Beth on my earpiece the whole way out. She said a payment in lieu of construction, which, yeah, she meant a payment in lieu of taxes.
Thank you.
And it's a contract.
I understand.
And the municipalities probably going to get about, can't guarantee it, but about the same amount of revenue that they would have gotten if it was taxes. That's how.
But that doesn't every year.
Yeah, every year until the pilot expires, then it would be subject to regular taxation.
I thought that was discounted more than we would if we were owner-occupied units as we do owned as single-family units.
Say that again?
Is it discounted?
It's discounted, is it not?
Is the pilot less than,
Again, you can't guarantee it, but my anticipation is the pilot would be approximately the same. The taxes are going to be less because the assessed value of the units are less because they're subject to deed restrictions and they're low and moderate. So they're going to be paying less taxes because taxes are all based on assessed value.
I'm taking up enough of your time. Is it possible to have this conversation outside of this committee?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. It was good.
I'll give you mine. Thank you.
My name is Phil Plasto, I live at 10 Cook Court.
Can you get closer to that microphone?
Mr. Burrow, I know you very well. What I
Can
want
you
to
get closer to the
know is,
microphone? We can't hear you.
you can't hear me?
Now we can. All right.
I'm Andy, and I can hear you. What I want to know is, which one has to be mad? You want to put 61 units on Dumont rental, 61 on the highway rental. We're only entitled to 20% rental out of 204, am I correct?
No. The requirement.
And 80%
The
for sale.
requirement for rental units under proposed second round rules, which govern affordable housing in the state of New Jersey, is that 25% of the township's prospective need number for a third round has to be rental units. Our number's 204, therefore 51 rental units is the minimum we have to provide. Now you might say, well, if 51 is the minimum, why are we providing
another
100?
question?
Okay.
All these people here are taxpayers in this town, and so am I. Do they have a voice where they want us? Where somebody else is making up our mind?
Well, John, that's a fair question, but the areas that you go is very limited because of water and sewer.
You keep
Maybe
saying
could
you
address
want,
that.
people don't want it on this one.
Yeah, I hear you, I hear you.
Right now, there are.
I don't want it in my backyard.
Yeah, I hear you.
No
Let
one
him
wants it in
explain.
their backyard.
Backyard.
No one wants it in their backyard. Okay? But right now, the available sites in the township really come down to two at this point.
Township
One
is
is.
obligated to buy
I
land.
can't answer the question.
The
if you
developer-
don't-
Would you let him answer the question?
Listen, if you don't want to hear the answer,
Let him answer the question, please.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Right now, the way we look at things, there are two potential sites that would meet the criterion for a realistic probability to produce housing. Dumont Road and two of the properties on the other side of Route 78 because they have sewer and water. Yeah, so if the township has to unilaterally decide what to do and they want some option which removes some of the affordable housing from Dumont, not all of it, because to put all of it on the other side of Route 78 might be deemed as overburdening that site, but the only way to do it is on a site with sewer and water. And again, so that option C is to rezone one of those 50 acres of one of those properties because the minimum density under COA's rules are 6 units an acre. 50 acres times 6 units is 300 units. 20% of the 300 units means 60 of the 300 would be low and moderate income. If you had 60 low and moderate income on the other side of 78, then the township could reduce the number of affordables at Dumont from 121 down to 61. The question I thought you were asking was if the minimum requirement is 25% of your number for rental, which comes, if 25% of 204 is 51, why would the township want any more than 51 rental units? So if that's the question, the answer is, because again, I heard Beth in her presentation explain that in order to get a 100% project where the township wouldn't have to pay, and if you look in the frequently asked questions, I think there's an estimate. Well, if there's not, I can tell you. If the township wanted to construct 121 units on their own, there's an estimate of about $19 million. So that's with no tax credits. If the township wants somebody to construct the project so they don't have to pay for it, it's going to have to get these 9% tax credits, not even the 4% tax credits. To get 9% tax credits, the HMFA, that's the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency, HMFA. In order, they're only going to do it for a 100% family rental project. And that's why, whether it's 121 units at Dumont or 60 units at Dumont, that's why they can't just, the township can't just get away with the bare minimum of 51 rental units. That's the answer.
Well, I still want to know is like, the people have a right to know or vote on where this is going. Now, according to the young lady over there, she says to me, the contract would be looking for sewers, water. On 78, there's no sewers, there's no water. Half of this development over here, maybe doesn't have sewers.
There's sewer and water for the Dumont site. On the other side?
Maybe that's not, we don't want it there.
Huh?
Oh, you don't want it there either?
The people don't want it there.
Okay. Well, it's got to go somewhere, and the only two sites.
I know where to put it, Mr. Brewer, but I can't tell these people where I want to put it. We don't want it here.
We talked after the meeting also.
You know, look, you know me from a long time ago.
I know.
Remember?
You can talk to me after the meeting.
And I haven't changed.
Obviously you have. Don't tell me where it goes.
I want to represent this beautiful housing they want to put up. I dealt with it for 35 years. It becomes the slum.
This doesn't have to allow, so you know. We don't want it either. This is forced on us by
I
the
worked
state.
for HUD for 35 years doing this low housing income. Let me tell you, I moved away from there to get away from it. Now it follows me here.
Go ahead.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Bob Lang, 738 Jackson Road, Greenwich Chase. I spent 5 years and $700 finding the asphalt plant through Lapacon. And all I can think of right now is an old comic strip called Pogo, where Pogo says we have met the enemy and they is us. And this is a lot more disconcerting than when I was going after the mayor, the ex-mayor of Lapacon, because this is really at home. I bought my house in Greenwich Chase in 2006. It's about $100,000 less in value than when I bought it. And that's okay. But if you actually put this thing on Dumont and Greenwich, as far as I'm concerned, my house has gone to zero. It's worthless. So this is the effect that you're going to have on me. You're going to have on me a person who spent 63 to 67 in the military for $100 a month. Right? Never asked anybody for anything. And this is going to wipe me out. So I'll have no choice but to just abandon the house and throw a match on it and walk away. Because it won't be worth living here. Not unless I build a brick wall with gun towers and searchlights around Greenwich Chase. And I won't do that. I'll just walk away, buy a house somewhere else. So, FYI, that's my opinion.
I'm Elizabeth Morbido Gonzalez. My address is 328 Greenwich Street. I moved out of Port Amboy to come to a community that's going to be better for my family. You're bringing back a community that I do not want in this location. I came into this area as a low-income family and built myself higher. And today, I basically bought my first house 9 months ago. I struggled, I worked hard, and I do not want the bad that was in back of me to come forward in my life. All that negativity is gone because of this community. I go in the backyard, I have a cup of coffee, I'm relaxed. I don't want the loud music going down the road and blah! I don't want that. I don't want the negativity of garbage on my property. I don't want that. So if you're gonna bring a community like that, then what was the sense of me buying a house in Greenwich? If that makes sense.
No, I heard it is.
You know, I worked hard. I've raised 5 daughters with my husband, and 4 of them are in college. One's in Puerto Rico with the FEMA program. One's in Cape Cod with with Rutgers, and she's an engineer. My other two in college. My third one is in Phillipsburg High School. I love this community. I am enjoying this community after 9 months of stress, heartache, pain, crying. Please do not bring it back. I don't want that. And I don't want that into my family, because to have a cup of coffee, and any of you guys are welcome to my address, come to my house. I live right across the street from the police department. Have a cup of coffee with me. It's quiet. I don't want that negativity to go down the road and go, blah, please. I understand it might be here, but let's bring it down to a level where that's not going to come forward, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Thomas Booth, THOMAS-BOOTHE. 605 Patricia Circus, Sturtsville, New Jersey. I also work for the county. I issue benefits every day to a lot of clients. So I'm reading the frequently asked stuff that was posted on the website. What realistic opportunity did you give to the judge? Because they say you guys provided a realistic opportunity to have this thing built here. So what was it that you provided as realistic?
Creating a realistic opportunity. Realistic opportunity is actually, it's a pretty specific term in the COA or affordable housing world here in New Jersey. And when we say we created a realistic opportunity, that means in Greenwich's case for the plan that for the settlement agreement that had been submitted in the housing plan that was previously adopted, it means that we have identified a municipally sponsored site that meets all of those site suitability concerns. Meaning the site is suitable in terms of being able to be developed and that there are no environmental constraints that preclude it. The municipality has control over the land and so forth. So having water and sewer, so creating that realistic opportunity essentially means that the town is creating this realistic opportunity for the creation of affordable housing units because the site or sites selected are able to be developed for the affordable housing units plan. So again, environmental, sewer, water, road, and so forth.
That's realistic money-wise, but not for a family. But I'm going to give you a realistic idea, or a view. I'm from the Bronx, and the day I left the Bronx to move over here, boyfriend went in the apartment building, the building's not these apartment buildings, I was in a single-family home, and he shot his girlfriend. My moving truck could not get through. So I was so thankful that I was leaving that. Like the other lady said, I was leaving that behind. The realistic opportunity that these people will have, zero. Because one, they're coming to an area where there are no jobs, that means no growth, there's nothing here. And if you take a survey of all the people that live in this area, ask them where they work. New York, Philadelphia, they all leave this area to be able to afford their homes. So your realistic opportunity that you presented is not correct. You did it for whatever statistical view of development, but for people's livelihoods, it's not realistic. I issue benefits. Not being rude. Realistic. We're going to talk realistic because that's what we're going to talk right here, right now. I issue benefits for people on a daily basis. I have families crying to me they can't find a job. You have Section 8, whatever housing they're in, it's meant for 4 people. I have families, 9 people to an apartment. 9 people live in an apartment. That's realistic. You build your projects, because realistically, that's what you're building, projects. We don't want to say, you have to make it look pretty on paper. So when you go back, you present a beautiful picture, but realistically, you're building a home. So you're going to have, because you're going low, you didn't even say low, we're going low. So when you come low, we don't have transportation for these people, we don't have jobs for them, so what are they going to do? they're gonna sit down and look at all the hardworking people here and say, oh, they're working, so I don't have to work. So when I go on vacation and I click on my door, when I come back, maybe I have enough in my house. Realistically, you're bringing people, when you bring people into a neighborhood, you want them to grow. If there's no growth here, they're stuck. There's no place for them to go. There's no jobs, there's no transportation. You go to Newark, they have buses, they have jobs. Here we have nothing. So realistically, you're creating a nice little hood project.
We're being constantly told that this is being forced on us. But the one word that stuck with me in the beginning of Ms. McManus's presentation is that this process is voluntary. Voluntary doesn't mean it's being forced on us. It means that we are voluntarily deciding to settle with the Fair Share Housing Committee. There are over 50 towns that have passed resolutions calling for a state solution that ends the tyranny of the courts. And this affordable housing topic is currently being discussed at the Assembly Housing Committee. Assemblywoman Holly Shapizi calls this the most urgent issue in the state currently. And things are being done on a state level to try to take the power away from the courts and put it back in the power of the state representatives. Assembly Republicans have submitted a host of bills that would ease the process on municipalities and eliminate court involvement. And some of these bills include shifting the housing obligations from municipalities to the state and eliminating the so-called builder's remedy, which is what we're all afraid of, right? But correct me if I'm wrong, a builder's remedy lawsuit can only occur if a builder has land to build on.
That's correct. And the builder here has land to build on and has sewer capacity and water on the other side of 78.
Only if it's sold to them.
No, they own it. They own it right now. In fact, when you say this is voluntary, the township voluntarily settled to get their number down from 292, which was Fair Share's expert, to 204. If we didn't settle and we go to trial, in my opinion, we're not going to get a number much less than 299 now. Because as Beth said, they had a full-blown 40-day trial. She didn't say, Judge Jacobson's opinion is 219 pages long. And she came out with a methodology that for some municipalities in the state, the number is less than Fair Share's expert. The reason I'm late tonight, I was up in Bergen County at another meeting where Fair Share's number was 1,400 and the Judge Jacobson number is 214. Here, the opposite happened. Our number through Fair Share was 292, and the Judge Jacobson number is 299. So let's say we don't voluntarily settle, and we litigate. We're going to have a number that's higher, most probably, than the number we settled on, and if we don't do something to meet that number within a short period of time, then we will lose the temporary immunity from builder's remedy suits that we have, and you're absolutely right. We're hoping that the legislature does something. This is exactly what happened in 1983, right? So Beth said Mount Laurel 1 was decided in 1975, and then municipalities were dragging their feet. 1983, the Supreme Court decides Mount Laurel 2. They added this thing called the builder's remedy. From 1983 through 1984, there were between 100 to 200 builder remedy lawsuits filed. With the builder's remedy lawsuit, the town doesn't get to pick where the housing does. The builders do. If we didn't have a landowner with sufficient vacant land and sewer and water, we wouldn't feel, the township wouldn't feel as under the gun as it does. So yes, we voluntarily did this so that we wouldn't have the builder's remedy. So some people say, oh, the builder's remedy is a fake thing. It's not a fake thing. I mean, in the Supreme Court, I took a look over the last couple of days. of how many builder's remedies decisions could I find. Because frankly, what happens if a builder's remedy suit is filed, most towns then settle. But after a builder's remedy suit is filed, the settlement is not, it would not be at the number we have now. The number would be higher. Most likely, quite frankly, Fair Share is not going to, they're not going to accept Judge Jacobson's $299. They're still going to try to get a higher number. And the sites then are out of the township's control. That is the realistic situation that will occur if the township didn't try to take some control into their own hands. Now, a lot of you guys are upset at them because when they took control, they didn't communicate as well as they should have. No one found out about it until the notices went out for the rezoning ordinance. People said, why is it all on one side? Well, that's what they're trying to do something about now. So I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, I agree with the other things you were saying. I watched the legislative committee, not all of it yesterday, but a lot of it. And you saw all those mayors saying, yeah, help us, help us. You have numbers a lot higher than $299. So,
but this is such a hot topic. Why are we rushing? Like, why aren't we?
Because
why aren't we using every legal angle that we can to stall this? Maybe these bills are going to get through and help us.
What legal angle is there left?
I don't know. You're really what's
I know. We're getting near the end. So we're getting near the end of the line on how much Judge Miller, who's the Mount Laurel judge for Vicinage 13, which is Warren, Hunterdon, and Somerset County. He started out in July of 2015 with 57 Mount Laurel cases, with 57 declaratory judgment actions. As of May 24th, 2018, of the 57, there were 40 that remained unsettled. So this is going to result, someone, or maybe one or two or maybe more municipalities are not going to settle. Judge Miller has an omnibus order entered. It doesn't apply to Greenwich because we settled, saying when the trial is going to be. The towns, if they don't settle, are going to face this trial, and their number, by definition, is not going to be as good as if it was if they settled. And after their number is higher, if they don't then pick sites. So you can say delay, delay. Delay in this context doesn't help. It hurts because when you delay and there's less and less municipalities left, you get ganged up on. These are not just the developers that are doing this, or the big residential developers. These are the developers that.
I hope this isn't taking up from my time. Is it?
No, this is an answer. You can take your time to answer the question, but you have developers such as Toll Brothers. You have all the big developers. They've all filed builders' remedy suits against different towns. We're trying to get it so we wouldn't have one filed against the township.
John, can you explain that the town did try to, you entered into some kind of lawsuit that we were part of, or some kind of legal action that we joined, right?
Oh, well, what the other gentleman was referring to, one of the cases I lost. I mean, if any lawyer tells you they win all their cases, they're lying. Okay? So when the woman before it, I tried to answer the question, and she obviously didn't want to hear it. She wanted to make her statement. What I thought she was asking, and what I was going to answer was, she said, if there's no jobs here and there's no growth, what are we doing? So COA, right, in 1999, 2000, they thought about that. And so the rules that they adopted that were overturned by the New Jersey Supreme Court were called growth share rules. Under the growth share rules, because we don't have much growth, our number was very low. Fair Share challenged those rules. They won in the appellate division. We started that case in the appellate division, and we banded together a lot of my firm's clients. So in the beginning, I had 20 municipal clients in the appellate division when we argued that those growth share rules are good. Please affirm them. That's one of the cases that we lost. Then it went to the New Jersey Supreme Court. 10 of the municipalities dropped out, too much money. I still had 10. By the way, Greenwich was in the first 20. They hung in. They were in the second 10. We argued to the Supreme Court. growth share is good. The Supreme Court said that growth share is not unconstitutional, but growth share is not allowed by the Fair Housing Act. And the Supreme Court said to the legislature, you can amend the Fair Housing Act to allow growth share. The legislature hasn't done anything. Then the Supreme Court said to COA, as Beth said, we're going to give you 5 months to redo those rules. They got to be like the prior rounds, first and second rounds. Then they have the 3-3 vote. I argued that case. By that time, 6 more of the municipalities dropped out. I had 4 municipalities left. Greenwich was one of them. I argued to the Supreme Court, give COA more time. You could read the opinion. The opinion, you could get it online. It is in the matter of the adoption of NJAHC 5:96 and 5:97. And it's reported at volume 221 of the New Jersey Reports, very first page of that volume, 221 NJ1. We lost that case. The Supreme Court said, sorry, COA's had 15 years to do these rules right. We're not giving any more delay. They've made a mockery of the situation. They're moribund, so we are dissolving COA's administrative remedy. Everything's going back to court. My alternate argument in front of the court, and you can actually, there's a video, you can watch my argument, and you can see that what I'm saying happened. I argued, listen, if you are going to affirm the invalidation of the rules, at least allow this declaratory judgment process, which one of the law division judges, this law division judge called Judge Kelly, had allowed, and let the municipalities have immunity while they process their cases. That's what the court did. But our temporary immunity was envisioned by the Supreme Court to last 5 months. We had an immunity order entered in July of 2015. We keep on having it extended. I am telling you, we're getting to the end of the line.
Check this clarification. When I said I didn't want this, I was referring to that case that you're talking about. When I said that, I know we have to provide a fair share, but I may have been confused.
We wanted growth share. We didn't want the rules based on the first and second round. But quite frankly, the rules based on the first and second round, they ignore growth. So the woman before you was absolutely right. But that's already been argued and lost.
Speaking of growth, the New Jersey population grew less than 1/3% each year over the past 5 years, a trend that's expected to continue until at least 2025. But these developments that are planned across the state will require almost 30% population increase. So, I mean, the courts really are overburdening the town. But my concern is that the proper research was not done before this settlement was made. Studies should have been done. I mean, how could you come up with a number to settle on without even know if a certain property would be able to sustain that? My concern is if you research what's happening in Morristown, New Jersey, it reads exactly what's happening here. And those residents are actually getting sued by the builders because their affordable plan is not consistent with the master plan of the town. And just real quick, I have the Greenwich Township master plan here, specifically the land use plan element, and I went through it, and there were a couple things on there that I noted that are inconsistent with this project that's being proposed. That area on Dumont that's being proposed is currently zoned for professional, office, limited research. And it actually is in the master plan of this township to establish zoning provisions to permit professional, office, and limited research uses in the westerly portion of the township immediately adjacent to the historic service area and interstate highway to provide for growth in the township's non-residential tax base, not for affordable housing. To establish zoning standards that will limit the impact of new development on existing neighborhoods and developed areas. And also that area in the master plan is within the critical grassland habitat, which is listed in the master plan as a critical environmental site. So what happened in Morristown is that the affordable plan that was developed, there were inconsistencies with the master plan, and Morristown residents are now suffering. And my concern is that the proper research wasn't done before the settlement was made. And that was apparent at the first meeting with the town council when we were asking questions. Nobody really knew the answers. And that's disconcerting, it really is. But I appreciate that the town council is considering these other options, and I hope that these other options are thoroughly investigated for the benefit of everybody to make sure that we are not negatively impacted for this project. And my last question is, based on these studies, for example, like a traffic study is going to be done. Let's say they determine that a traffic light needs to be put there. Who pays for that, the town or the developer?
The developer.
And how about the expansion of the sewer to that area?
The developer.
Pays for that?
Correct.
And what about the sewer tax?
What is sewer tax? Use fees. The connection fees?
No, the
No,
use.
use fee, gallons fee for each one.
The developer.
Developer will pay for that?
Yes.
For the sewer tax that wouldn't be assessed? If it's a rental unit?
The residents are gonna use the sewer, like in Wyndham Farm, we pay for the sewer. So she's asking would they be paying
The
for it?
owner of that development, the rental development, would pay that, because it's a rental project. That's why.
That wouldn't be assessed to the residents?
No, it's treated just like sewer's treated for everyone else.
Well, I'm just asking because you're proposing rental units versus owned. I'm not familiar with it.
You have other rental units in the township, not affordable rental units. Just because someone either rents an apartment or a house, it doesn't change how the sewer is dealt with.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Colleen Colucci. I live on 150 Revere Road. I am a well-educated woman. I have a bachelor's in nursing. I've done open heart surgery, and I tried to resuscitate quite a few people that tried to die. So I am the face of low to moderate income. You shouldn't be so scared of what it brings. The condos on Revere Road are low and moderate income. We pay monthly HOA. We pay the same sewage. We pay the housing yearly fees as well. The only thing we get is a subsidized house. I have 2 children, and I can't make it without this subsidized house. I've lived here for over, let's say 40 years, maybe longer. But I've seen everything progress before Home Depot, let's put it that way. So it's not that scary. I think rentals are a little scary, but condos, they come with regulations, they come with bylaws, and you have to follow them. So to have a rental, I'm not really sure, but a condo, it's not so bad as everybody's scared, it appears. The only problem I see is parking. Sinkholes are a big thing. And now the low to moderate income needs to come up with 10% of their housing value because we don't qualify for FHA. So that's another problem. Yes, you do have this one time only to get it right, because once it's built, the housing is us. It's not them anymore, it's us. And they don't help us, we help ourselves. We're in our own community. So that's my best that's my best way of putting things. I'm a little nervous, because I felt like I was going to get lynched. But it's not so bad. We don't leave our trash out. We plant flowers. We take care of things. There's always one bad apple in the group, as you well know. But they get a letter and they get fined. So if you have any questions, I'm on the board of the condo. Nobody shows up to those meetings, but you're welcome to come. The board will meet with you at any time.
You're welcome.
Jason Gibson, 203 Yvonne Way. That's actually a good segue into mine. I'd like it to be noted, I know not many people were at the first meeting for this. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I actually was on record as a resident of Wyndham Farm saying I want Greenwich Chase, people who are invested in the community. The stigmatism was around 100% rentals, just so you know, for anyone who wasn't there. I think that's been echoed multiple times across this meeting. We want people invested in the community, right? People that are willing to stay here, take pride in what they do, just like all of us, right? All of us have different backgrounds, all of us live in different financial situations across town, right? I have just a general question about the plan, right? So the plan has been in effect for numerous years, right? We have drawings rendering from 4 years ago, okay? Anyone who was not at the last land use board meeting, Beth gave a presentation on redoing the old school, right? Very thorough, reasoning was clear, and one of the things that stuck out to me was, one of the reasons you said it was 2 miles, right, from 2278 interchange, meaning that the land was not valuable, right? Our most valuable land, quote, is at 7822 interchange. Why have we been planning for years to develop our most sought-after property for any type of housing and not some type of revenue-generating business like it's currently zoned? I mean, I generally think that you are exploring options. Hopefully it's genuine. But just a general question, like, why was Plan A for so many years to use our most valuable land for something that doesn't generate a lot of revenue, right? We pointed out
That was owned by a private developer. What the township did, they struck a deal. At the same time they were trying to strike a deal with the developer on the other side of 78, they struck a deal that part of that would be preserved as open space. 15 acres would be used for affordable housing because it was realistic. The same sort of thing was in the works for the other side of 78 with a 15-acre carve-out for affordable housing. That one fell through. That's why.
So there was no requirement for the town to purchase land, correct? We were taking that on as
voluntarily,
development land.
so they wouldn't have to zone for 5 times that amount.
We can't. So the other point I had about Greenwich Chase, if you look at our master plan, right? Greenwich Chase is something like 2.6 homes per acre, right? CO's own recommendation is 6 as a max. The proposed plan is 10. It's 10 per acre.
6 units an acre is a minimum, not a max. That's the minimum.
So we're going above it because?
Because it's a 100% project to get it done and get all the units done so that we don't have to zone. That's what the theory was, so we don't have to zone
so we don't
for 5 times that amount because we lost the other site on the other part of the road. Now it turns out that developer who in 2010 walked away, maybe all of a sudden they realized that
they want to generate some revenue from a project for a warehouse.
Correct, and maybe the opposition to Dumont woke them up. You never know.
So just one other point to kind of compound on that. So Beth, you are the planner for Morristown as well, right? That was brought up.
For what?
Morristown, New Jersey. Yes.
Morristown, as in Morristown downtown. Yes.
Morristown, sorry.
Yeah, Burlington County, not
Really, I
Morristown.
apologize. There was a recent Q1 from the Morristown Patch, their own newsletter, right? Their town council voted against a 100% inclusionary project in one location because they didn't want to, for lack of a better word, some ladies' songs, whatever you want to call it, they've had a history of intermixing, right, as the planner, their affordable housing within the community, right? So just a question, I mean, you plan for us to, again, I understand the point about negotiating land deals originally. I never understand why it was the goal to have 100% in one spot, especially when you have Greenwich Chase, which is affordable housing. Like it seems like we're pushing it all to one side. I'm not quite sure why.
I don't want to get into the details of Morristown, but just to clear things up, I want to be clear that yes, I think you're referring to one specific site that the town had considered using 100% affordable housing for and had later decided not to.
Yeah, the Nagel tract.
The Nagel tract,
off-
exactly.
off-
But you might also be interested to know that the township has 2 other 100% affordable housing sites in its plan.
Mixed within the town.
I think that probably depends on which resident you ask.
Okay, thank you very much.
Quick question. It appears to my eyes as though you folks can tell the future. You have, it appears to my eyes as though you folks possess some special ability to tell the future. You are making recommendations based on what you see is going to happen in the future. Therefore, you must have a unique ability to see into the future. What I think is, no you don't, you are making suggestions, you are entering into agreements because you are afraid of what might happen. You don't know that it will happen. I'm not so sure that's a good way to conduct government. In fact, I don't think it's a good way at all. And surely, Ms. McManus, you have lots of expertise with respect to affordable housing. I read your CV on LinkedIn, and I see you have listed that you are a special master to the New Jersey Supreme Court insofar as the implementation of affordable housing is concerned. Are you working for us in that capacity or something else?
I'm a special master to Superior Court, and no, I don't work...
Your CV says Supreme Court.
If that's true, I'll change it, because that's a typo.
Okay.
But it's Superior Court. I do not work as special master for Greenwich. I serve as the municipal planner. So those are 2 separate roles here. I fulfill the municipal planner role.
All right, but no one ever clearly delineated in what capacity you were working here. The only reason that I knew you were a special master is because I took the time to read your CV.
Right, I present myself here as the municipal planner, as I introduce myself at this meeting and as other meetings, and additionally as my contract with the municipality states.
And remember, we, the residents, are your bosses, and that extends to these folks.
That's
Do not
actually
interrupt
wrong.
me, sir.
That's
Do not
actually
interrupt me, sir.
We
Do not
represent
interrupt me,
the
sir.
township committee.
Do not
We don't
interrupt me,
represent the
sir.
mayor. We don't
Do
represent
not interrupt me,
individual
sir.
township committee people.
Do not interrupt me,
We
sir.
represent the township.
You, sir, are interrupting me. You are not letting me speak.
I answered your question. If you have
You know what? It was a statement. You read my mind apparently and thought that I was asking a question. I think this is ill-advised to pursue placing those rentals on that parcel of land. I understand the whole concept of government coercion has to be done. I get it. But your job is to be responsive to us, not to knuckle under to what the state, you know what, I'm a little bit surprised to see you going like this.
There's 5,500 other residents in Township, so don't tell me I work just...
I'm making a statement, and by the way, John Bramnick is having a rally in Trenton to call for legislation to control, out of control, legislation like affordable housing. There is very little legislation that allows for anybody but the courts to implement this fair share housing. We need sensible legislation. John Bramnick, in September, Trenton rally.
Constantine chances for district court. I know all the comments are being recorded, so I'll make a statement and you will remember it. We are going to have these actions that are being taken or will be taken, there's my prediction. I'm a professional in problem solving. Okay, I'm a consultant, you can look me up if you like. This is a perfect recipe for disaster for our town. Let me explain why I have concluded that. And then if that position is not adequate, I will respect it. Mr. McManus, if I spelled your name correctly, stated that the impact assessment will be made after the selection decision will be made. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, that is stupid. So my friends, that is stupid. I have been doing this work pharmaceutical and medical device industry since 1980 in various capacities. Okay, I reached the level of vice president. Every time there is an issue, many times companies have issues with consent decrees issued to them for their use by the court. Okay, and of course, you have to really provide the company so they can provide the court, okay, with what's called a remediation, or in legal terms, litigation, whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing, okay? So what you do is you have what's called alternate scenarios. You provide what's called an impact assessment. We have a right here, as residents, to know if I choose option A, what will happen. There are assumptions, there are conclusions, and so on and so forth. That has to happen now, not later. Later is too late to act because there may not be any fix. Okay? So that's what I'm saying is we are walking into a ticking time bomb. Okay? A ticking bomb here is what we're doing. And all of us are going to pay the price for it. These folks that are coming and they're going because that's their job. They're advising us. But we are foolish accepting that type of recommendation to do impact assessment later. Now, of course we lost we lost 7 months because the court order was in December 2017 and now we have end of July. So we lost 7 months plus basically doing nothing as far as we know. Maybe you do, but we don't. Because everything has been done, you know, behind closed doors, you know, in those executive meetings, you know. So what the town needs to know, what the residents need to know is how that is going to, whatever we're doing is going to impact my taxes, my quality of life, right? Safety, property value, environmental issues, all these things. We have to know now, not later. Later is too late. The other fellow here mentioned that his property has gone down 100,000, whatever, and if this were to occur, it will go down to zero. We need to know that. Okay, so folks, please wise up. Take action, because this is what's happening right now. We are just basically are being blindfolded in looking to find needle in the haystack. It's not going to happen. Okay? Take it from me. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 64 years old. So please do analysis. I'm not talking about analysis paralysis, but study. Draw assumptions, draw conclusions, and proceed. And then communicate what is your plan so we can basically give you some input. Okay? We have a right to give you input because we live in this town. Thank you.
Good evening, Howard. Roy Campos, 16 Brill Road. Just a couple of quick questions. You talked about a time where that time's running out. How much time before a concrete final decision plan has to be instituted?
Before we entered into the amended settlement agreement, the time would have run out. That's why we got an extension until November 15th. So what the amended settlement agreement says is that we're having a conference, a case management conference in front of Judge Miller on Monday, July 30th, to see if he'll enter an order, which I assume he will, but I don't know, that will extend the dates in accordance with the signed amended settlement agreement. It will give us to October 15th if we want to then further amend the settlement agreement to change anything in it, such as 121 units at Dumont. If we want to do anything other than 121 units at Dumont, we have till October 15th to have that in writing with fair share. And then we have until November 15th to to adopt the ordinances to implement either what we have now, which I'm calling option A, or if there's an agreement reached with the Florio Carucci 3 client developers, option B, or if we just unilaterally make the change for option C, which is on one of those clients' property, but we don't need consent. The only time we need consent from them is if there's going to be zoning done in exchange for them building the affordable housing, because we're not obligated to give them warehousing, and they're not obligated to build the housing. So October 15th, to either strike a deal with them or make some other change and sign another amended settlement agreement that puts in writing what the plan is. November 15th to adopt the implementing ordinances.
Okay, that's one, thank you. Secondly, so say November 15th comes and you have to put the ordinance in and it's a done deal. How long before the developer actually breaks ground? Because it seems like Dumont is a done deal. Because it's either, well, option A, B, and C, there's always a little bit on Dumont. Something is on Dumont, correct? Like I heard that, correct?
Correct.
Is he shaking his head no?
No, part of it. I thought you meant the whole 100.
No. I said no matter what,
Yeah,
something is going on Dumont. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Something is going on Dumont no matter what.
Yes,
That's correct.
Okay, I want to get that point before we
Now, so the Dumont project, because it's going to be a 100% presumably rental project, because how else is the township going to meet its 25% rental obligation, which is again 25% of the 204 units, which is 51 units. If that's a municipally sponsored project, no matter how many units are there, that has to be constructed within 2 years of the judge's approval of this amended settlement agreement.
So 2 years from November 15th. I'm not hoping it's the exact. Give me a
Somewhere
ballpark.
around there.
Okay. So 2009, 2020, we're digging ground, we're breaking ground, or it has to be built in 2 years.
Start construction.
Start construction within 2 years of the approval of the settlement agreement, which presumably would be in a hearing sometime after November 15th. I'm going to take a guesstimate, educated guess, probably in December. The judge might not sign the order till January. So let's say the 2 years would start January 2019, so the construction would have to start by January 2021.
21.
That's Dumont. Now the other one, there'll be no time limit. If you do an inclusionary development, it just has to be constructed at some point within your compliance period. So it would have to be constructed sometime before 2025, or someone could then say it's not realistic. But I don't know who else in the township would say it's not realistic. So, but if you want, for estimating purposes, Dumont by January 2021
will break ground. At the latest, break ground the latest.
Right.
They could break ground February of 19.
Right, and break ground on, if there's one on the other side, by, let's say, July 2025, just for estimating
So
purposes.
one on the other side of 70 would be a lot farther down the road than the one on Dumont.
Well, it could be a lot sooner, I'm saying. There's a deadline for the
No,
Dumont.
I understand. I'm looking
There's
as
no-
far as possible.
There's no deadline, well, it's not conceivable, as soon as, if that was rezoned, that they come in for, site plan approval the next month. That could be built a lot sooner than 2 years.
I don't want to build at all, but the later the better. Question saying that it has to be with accessible roadways, it has to be accessible sewer and water. Why can't the developer build it on a tract of land that doesn't have sewer now? Why don't they put in the sewer? If they're getting all the tax breaks, if they're getting the tax credits, because they're not doing this for the goodness of their heart.
Dumont has tax credits, the other one would not have tax credits.
Okay, if someone wants to do that, it's our land, correct? It's our land on the other side of
Right now, the township owns it.
Okay.
Oh, the other side?
173, we don't know.
No, that's a private developer owns it.
Okay, if they want to develop over there, why can't they pay for the sewer and to make it simple?
They already own the sewer. They're going to pay for the...
No, I'm supposed on the other side, but it's not sewer, correct? It's all septic?
No.
Sewer's on the other side.
Okay.
Okay.
Sewer's already in.
So sewer's on both sides, so there's sewer capacity I mean, the piping and all the facility is on both sides.
The piping and the capacity is it's in the ground. There's even a pumping station.
I understand that on this side, on Dumont and on.
No,
Holmes Ferry.
173, it's all ready to go.
It's all ready to go.
Sewer-wise.
And there's no way to put it all over there because of the density and the effect on population, correct?
John, can you address if we put it all there, would it make the number higher of the?
Well, put it this way. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of, innumerable options. I said the most logical, I didn't say logical, I said the most obvious, I said, were those three. You could put it all on the other side. If you put it all on the other side, just so you understand, your zoning, unless they agree, right, which they're not going to, the developer's not going to agree over there. So if you did it unilaterally, and you wanted to put all 121 units there, 121 times 5, you would have to zone for 605 units, 20% of which would be 121. Just listen, that's 20% is if they're for sale units, but they can't all be for sale units.
No, I saw this.
51 has to be rental, so if it's rental, you can't tag them for 20% set aside, you have to allow them to have a 15% set aside, which means it's going to be more than 605 units. It would be 605 if they were all for sale. It's 51, it would be 806. You'd have to zone the other side of Route 78 for 806 units in order to have 51 rentals and...
That's all right, a lot.
Something like...
a lot worse.
70 for sale.
All right. So pretty much there's no delay in this. This is happening either way. It's just a point of where it's going to be.
That's correct.
That's
and
we can agree that the financial impact on the residents that own homes, their tax assessment is going to go up undoubtedly. Correct?
No, well, my assumption would be that because a homeowner's taxes never covers the services, the schools or whatever.
Sure, you heard from that real estate broker.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry?
You heard from that real estate broker who spoke for it that said there's no.
He's saying that taxes will probably go up because there's going to be an increase in services and everything because of the 605 homes.
Okay, so that's a good point. Okay, so one municipality. So there's a.
I mean, you don't have to explain it. I'm just saying it's just common sense that our taxes are going to go up for rental. They're going to don't pay taxes.
There's a state constitutional provision that says state mandate, state pay.
Okay.
So the question you're asking is, if this is a state mandate, which it is,
right,
why shouldn't the state pay for the increase in police, increase in school?
Correct.
So one municipality has taken that very issue to the New Jersey Council on unfunded mandates and made that argument and lost.
Of course. But
and the reasoning was that because it's a constitutional requirement, and I don't remember who, someone said they read the state constitution and they don't see anything about affordable housing. That's right. There's nothing that says...
I understand, I'm not being picky, I understand you guys are in a tough spot because the state is pushing this on you, but you only can get so much from the stone. How high do you want the taxes to go before people just leave? I don't want to sit in your seat, but I'm telling you, how much more do you want us to pay? You know, how much more do you want us to pay? I understand the state says you got to put these people in here. I would say, and you can't put all low-income ownership, you have to put rentals. Fine. And taxes go up all the time. Understand that, but it's going to get to a point where it's going to be, it's not unaffordable. You just can take so much, and people are going to go. They really are, because they do cross over, go somewhere else, or whatever.
This argument is a great argument. This is the argument you should make to that the legislative committee, the assembly committee that's considering affordable housing. Everyone, right now, there were many down there, but there weren't that many individuals. The individuals that were down there, they had affordable housing advocates down there. They took time out of their day to go down there. These legislators have to hear from people other than just mayors, okay? Or nothing's going to get done. That's the only solution to the problem.
I love living here. I have the greatest neighbors in the world, and I love where I am, but it comes to a point where dollars make sense. You know, raise. come to a point where it's not affordable anymore. You know, I understand you guys are in a tough spot, I really do. You gotta put it in. It's not like I am not putting it in, I'm putting it in. You have to put it in. Just gotta be a better way. There's gotta be some other tracks where you can put 10, 15, you know, so if someone comes off 78 and 22, doesn't see 60, you know, whatever it is, 10 buildings, 8 buildings, 7 buildings, all it's gonna say, ooh, what's that? Am I gonna go? Of course, the realtor's gonna take them around and try to avoid what that section is to sell your house, but it's gonna be difficult. It really is. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Two things I just wanted to say. One is I completely agree with the gentleman, and if you really want this to change, you have to make your voice heard in Trenton. They are the governing entity that decides this. They are the ones that can change this. The municipalities have very little ability to change state law, the Constitution. In fact, they have none. You need different representation in Trenton if you want this to change. Everything you're saying, I think most of us agree with. All of us agree with. I don't think anyone's disagreeing. But to change it, you need different representatives in Trenton. Look at who represents the state of New Jersey and Trenton. That's where you have to go. That's what needs to change. This has been a problem for 40 years. Who's controlled the Senate and the Assembly for that time? That's the answer. That is the only answer. We're listening to you. We are. We are listening to you. Because we are.
Well, what you want is us to say, okay, we're not going to build it. That's not a practical answer.
Answer the question on ownership.
Okay. Listen, the other point I wanted to just make, because the other gentleman was talking about the analysis, and at the last township meeting, the subcommittees appointed, 2 members from the township committee, 3 members from the land use, Beth, John, township engineer, and as John mentioned, we have 3 current options. A, existing, B, if there's a proposal from these 3 clients over on the other side of 17, and C, this zoning. That's what that subcommittee is going to do. We're going to do the analysis. We're going to look at the impacts. We're going to present what it would mean to the town. These options weren't available prior to July 10th. So this committee is working for you, looking at other options, making sure we find a solution, not that it's going to make everybody happy, but one that we can live with. And that's our goal.
And just as a reminder, we got to be out here by 10:30, and see there's like 5 or 6 people behind you, so just be thoughtful of the other people.
I think it's important, though, that you reiterate why it's rentals, because that's been brought up a lot. I think you need
The
to...
second round code rules require 25% of your third round prospective need number be rental. 25% of 24 units is 51 units. There's nothing we can
That's
do
not what
about
I'm
it.
talking about. Why 100% rental?
And
project?
100% rental there, because the only way the project can be done without the township spending millions of dollars is for a developer to get 9% tax credits. The only way you can do that from the HMFA is if you have a 100% family rental project that can't even be seen.
He asked the question, the answer is, please no more yelling from the audience. Go ahead.
First of all, Brad Russo, 206 Yvonne Way, backyard to this proposed project. It's really not a proposed project, and I think that's some of the frustration with the town. And I mean, everyone's coming into this now, right? Everyone's looking at this project now, and this is the first time we really put eyes on it. I'm involved in the legal process locally. I had no idea until I got notice, and the problem with that is, you know, the presentation tonight centered on we're fearing builder's remedy because that takes control away from the town. Mr. Perone just stated the state legislators are mandating this, and that's true. That's true. We have the obligation, right? Some of the criticism tonight against town council, it's not fair because we have the mandate, but what we have control over is how we deal with it, how it's zoned in this town. Now the problem with the plan and the problem with our residents, and the reason for some of the frustration, is that we're kind of in this backward situation. We're here talking about we're afraid of builder's remedy, right? Because primarily it's a high density. we're going to get this high density, we don't have control of it. We're in zoning 2 of Mount Laurel, which sets the minimum at 6, yet our plan is over 10. And I heard the woman from Greenwich Chase very eloquently state that this isn't something we should fear. And I wholeheartedly agree with the Revere Road argument. And that's how it's been presented at the beginning weeks ago. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 100% rental. We're talking about over 10 units.
We're condos, we're not rentals out.
Correct. And there's a difference. So if we're gonna be so afraid of builder's remedy, it sounds like we're just taking the brunt of it and agreeing to it. And I understand that might take us looking at different spots, but some of the reason for the frustration is that although it's state mandated, although we have to do this, although the courts require it, as town council, you guys stifled our voice. And you know what, not even town council, the land use board. Because by the time we got notice of this, it's not, as we've been saying tonight, a proposed project, or option A or option B. The town has legally committed, had said, this is the plan we want, presented it to the court has already agreed to it. We're contractually obligated. We don't need to get, it's not, COA could say, we don't want to grant an extension. We agreed on the project and that's it. The court's review of the fair share plan, the review that led to this project being approved, the court is looking at this from the state mandate. Does this comply with the state mandate? What's lost in that process is this right for our residents? Is this the best plan for our residents? The court doesn't care. The court doesn't care who lives next door. The court cares, this is the constitutional mandate, this plan complies with it, COA's happy with it, this is what town council said, who is our voice. The problem now is we're post-settlement, and we're trying to assert our voice, and now we're being told there's options. If we were given notice prior to this, if we could have these discussions and educate the town and get people out, our voice could have been heard before the settlement. The courts don't determine what's in the best interest of our town. We do, our elected officials do. It was even stated that after court approval in the presentation, the town must partner with the developer, right? We must help them zone it. So we're committed to this project right now. Everyone wants their voice heard. It's late. We're late in the game. As Mr. Drill said, we're coming to an end. And that's the frustration that I have with the project. And some of it, look, you guys set this up. It's informational. This is a complex topic, even for people with legal degrees. And it's appreciated by me. Maybe not by some others. It's appreciated by me. And since I've gotten notice as a resident within 200 feet of this plan, I've contacted Mr. Drill. I've written letters to him. He's been cordial. He's responded to me. I have lost a couple cases as an attorney, so that's fair criticism.
Thank you.
The other thing is, the answer might be right in front of us. If we keep our community buildings as hot as this, no one's going to move. But seriously, the options, it's infuriating as a resident who's given notice after we've agreed and legally obligated our town to now say, yes, you know what, maybe it's not a good idea that we have over 10 units per square foot. We've agreed to it already. What if this other developer, what if it falls through? What if they never wrote the letter? What if we didn't have other options? We were given notice, we came out. Obviously this is an issue that people want to voice it. And it's been planned for some time.
One thing I want to say is the actual density at Dumont, because it's going to be a 121 unit project at most. So it's not going to be 144 under any circumstance. So if it's 121 divided by the 14 acres, that comes to 8.64 units an acre. I just want to factually get that out there. It's not 144 divided by 14. I know that.
But we've agreed to allow up to the higher number.
No, the settlement agreement says from 121 to 144, we can choose. And I believe that the choice is going to be 121 when the thing goes out. If it's 121 units there, and if the thing goes out for an RFQ or RFP at 121, it's going to be 121. If it's one of the other options and it goes down to 60, obviously it would be even less, but it's not. It's not going to be 10 units an acre. I just want to clarify that.
Revere Road is only 72. So if
Brad,
you want to
Just
compare that.
From my perspective, prior to the June meeting, the option for 173 was not there. They pursued that years ago. Dow pulled out. So there was no option to offer.
That was clear to me, and that's what I'm saying. So the town already commits itself, right? And then maybe there's other options now. But what if that never came about? That everyone's voice here tonight means nothing. The town already agreed to everything, really.
Well, fair share. We have it posted on the website, and you know how to get into the e-courts. I made sure I filed everything in e-courts. So you can see they signed, Fair Share signed an amended settlement agreement, giving the township the opportunity to change the thing if we want, and if we reach an agreement with the Florio Perucci people on option B. But we also have the ability to change it and do this option C or other things. So they've already agreed in the first amended settlement agreement to extend the dates to let us explore doing something.
Is there options elsewhere in the town or options to purchase property that are being looked at?
There are no other options. There was a committee that's been in one form or another since 2010 looking at this stuff. Again, past history, we were that close with one of the other developers, and then they said no. And then, I wasn't just saying that in jest. I have a feeling that the reason that this July 10th letter came out of the blue was because someone was reading the paper and saw that there were residents upset about the Dumont Road site. I have a feeling that developer thought that they needed us more than we needed them, and now they see there's an opportunity. That's my guess.
If that plan in some way, shape, or form goes through and the numbers are reduced on Dumont, is it not possible to meet the maximum for retirement community and put those units in Dumont? Because that's 25%, I believe.
You need 51
rental.
Family rental. 51, quarter of them, family rental. Maximum 25 senior rental. Minimum 25% family rental. So the minimum is what we have to hit. We can or cannot do senior. We can do more rental.
But that's what I'm saying. So if there's some rental near the warehousing units, it's possible to have a row of senior housing on Dumont.
You're not going to get tax credits. A family rental project will not get 9% tax credits unless it's all in one place and it's 100% family rental.
John, just for clarification, are you talking about the warehouse option or the other option?
Yeah, so if there's a mixture between the warehouse option and Dumont.
That's why I want to clarify, because that is different, so you got to let them know that.
Under option B, okay?
Option B.
Option B is the warehouse.
Option B is where those clients, the township would rezone those clients, the 3 clients' properties for warehouse. But in exchange, the township's got to get something and get something big. What we have in mind is that developer would construct all of the township's affordable housing. And under that circumstance, then it's conceivable you wouldn't need a 100% family rental project. You need at least 51 family rental units, but if we got them to agree...
That's across the town. That was my question.
No, the half on Dumont, part of the 60 on Dumont would be owned, right?
You could do 30 rentals on Dumont, 30 for sale. You could do 30 rental on the other side of 78, 30 for sale, if those developers agreed to build them all for us. So we wouldn't have to spend 1 penny, then we're not talking about getting tax credits. That might be pie in the sky. That's why we have this option C.
So, and just to clarify, the courts do not care about the residents. I mean, I'm not saying they don't care about the residents, but the scrutiny of the court.
I would hate to make a statement being filmed along lines like that.
Said it first.
What I will say is that the test of fairness The test is not fairness to the residents. The test
Then
is...
who's responsible for the resident's voice in the plant?
We are.
Look at it. They're trying to do the best they can do under the circumstances. That's all I can say. They're trying to do the best they can do under the circumstances. Up until July 10th, there was no other option.
Thank you.
Let me follow up on that. Is there an option D, following up on what Brad had brought up? If we didn't settle, let's do nothing now. What's the answer?
Do you really want me to say?
Yeah, tell them.
So if you don't, and you let the clock run out, and our immunity is lifted, I know the developer who will file the builder's remedy lawsuit against you. It's a developer with the vacant land and all the sewer capacity. Huh? Oh, because it's going to be a lot more than 300 units in 60. It's going to be...
John, wait till he quiet down, they're not hearing me.
It's going to be, we went through it before, it's going to be close to 800 units on their site. Now, some of you might think that as long as it's on that side, that's fine by you. I have a feeling that the people on the other side of 78 don't think...
I already got phone calls on that side of 78.
My name is Chris Colangelo. I'm on 701 Jackson. My name is Chris Colangelo. I'm on 701 Jackson Road. I just had some questions regarding builder's remedy. So you had mentioned the number can be a lot larger. Is there? Can you explain more about the types of units? So if we got sued for builder's remedy, what the potential units could be? So you said 800. Is it have to be 80-20, or I think that there's some different numbers. Can you just explain a little bit more about how that would be?
So, if the township doesn't go ahead with a voluntary plan, so it doesn't get a judgment of compliance and repose from the court, then the court's going to lift the immunity to builder's remedy suits. And then let's say this one particular developer filed a builder's remedy action. So first of all, the first negative consequence is the number. It's not going to be 204. At best, I'm estimating it's going to be 299. They'll try to go higher. But let's say it's 299. Call it 300. It's easier that way. If this one particular developer wanted to try to put all 300 affordable units on its site, you take 300 multiplied by 5 is 1,500 units. Now, there's no way that they'd be able to build that in one phase. It wouldn't make any economic sense.
Sorry, where did that come from?
So builder's remedy is you take the township's affordable housing obligation, you multiply it by 5. The builder's remedy is a judgment that gives the builder site-specific relief. Because the township has not complied with its affordable housing obligation, the developer gets to put it on his or her site. But they get rezoned at 5 times the amount of the affordable housing. Assume they're all for sale units and the developer didn't want to do rental. The developer basically, they'll tell us in the court what they want to do and that'll be approved. They'll tell you if it's rental, they'll tell you if it's for sale, they'll tell you what type of units, they'll tell you where they want them. We have the test for a builder's remedy. 3 things. The requirements for eligibility for a builder's remedy. First, the plaintiff has to successfully get the court to say that you're out of compliance. That's going to be the easiest thing anyone's ever done because we haven't done anything, and now we have this extrapolation from Judge Jacobson showing our numbers at 299 minimum. If the developer wants to spend some money, they'll bring in an expert to try to make the number happen. Let's assume they go low budget. They'll take the 299. So they passed the first part of the 3-part test. The second part of the test is they have to propose as part of the development that they want a substantial amount of low and moderate income housing. What's substantial? The Mount Laurel 2 case says that 20% is substantial. So 20% of the total number of units would be low and moderate income units. That's why I said it.
I mean, do they have to build, you said 300 times 5, 1,500, would they have to build all 15, or could they say we just want 3?
No developer in their right mind would build 300 affordable units. They don't, the market units are where they make their money. The developers don't want to build the low and moderate. The only reason they're doing that is they're getting a density bonus to give them more units. And then the last part of the test, the burden's on the municipality. If the municipality can prove that the impact of the proposal on the environment or substantial planning concerns that are clearly contrary to sound land use planning, that's the only thing that can prevent the builder's remedy. The problem is, if they wanted 1,500 units at 6 units an acre, that's the COA minimum. Even though that would be like a radical transformation of the township, so it would be phased, because no developer is going to be, I mean, that would be lunacy, I would think, for a developer to put 1,500 units on the market at the same time. So it'll be phased over 5 years or 10 years, but that's what the potential for a builder's remedy is.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, I kind of find it hard to believe that someone would build.
Okay, let me, how about this?
I'm not talking about what if, I'm saying, let's assume we get sued for builder's remedy, so that's kind of the situation that I'm in. I guess a couple of questions. For the tax incentive that you talked about, it has to be the single units, they have to have sewer, right? How many properties do we have in the township that would qualify? Is it just the 2?
Say again,
how many properties do we have that would qualify with the sewer?
Dumont and one of the developer's property on the other lot, on the other side of 78.
So, I guess my question is, if they want to build warehouses and things like that, if we allowed them to develop, right, and we gave them, say, tax abatement or something to incentivize them.
My concept is if the township lets them do warehouse, why would we want to give them a tax abatement? We want them to build our units.
What I'm saying is, if they develop the land and it can no longer support the rentals because it's got warehouses all over it, then the only other location.
No, the rental is part of the deal. They have to build it.
No. I'm saying if that land is off the table, right? If they develop it, right, without any buildings on it, just commercial warehousing, then we only have one other property left so if we are, and I think we had said before that could be sold. So I guess my question is, if we incentivize those developers.
I understand. So if let's say that the township decided to zone all of this developer's land and warehouse, and not let any residential.
Yep.
Okay? And let's assume that it stayed that way, and then I'm going to get back to this. Okay? But assuming it stayed like that, so now the only other person, the only other entity in the township that has a suitable site is the township. But now you're saying, who would file a builder's remedy for that site? Fair Share. Fair Share Housing Corporation would come into court and ask for an order to have Greenwich take care of its site. They're not going to let Greenwich take a site out and then not comply with its obligation. That's number one. Number two, let's assume you zone it for warehouse. What if they don't build 100% of it for warehouse? Okay, and then let's say that the township builds 121 units at Dumont. The fourth round is in 2025. Dowell comes back. Remember, they have sewage capacity for a lot of residential units. Warehouse almost uses no sewer capacity. So they got this warehouse there. They're sitting on sewer capacity. And you're going to deal with them, and you're not going to deal with them in the third round, you're going to deal with them in the fourth round. Maybe you're saying I'll be moved out of town by then.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to understand is, you could structure things in a way, and that property from our last meeting said we could sell it. That was a potential option. And so it's almost a poison pill, if you will, that if you take these two properties off, there's no longer any property that would be eligible for the fully subsidized housing. Someone could come in and do a builder's remedy, but they have to pay for it. And
if you zoned all of the developer's land warehouse, we did a calculation of, it's a minor amount of sewer capacity. So you're leaving the developer with a sewer capacity. So the developer comes in with some other property. What's the cost to him? All he's got to do is extend the sewer line. So you've taken out the properties right now, but he's still got the sewer capacity. He's still got the water. So yeah, it's going to cost him something to extend the line, but if he's on that side of 78, there's a lot of vacant land in the township. There's a lot of cornfields.
Yeah, again, it's a little bit of a brainstorm here, but I think what I'm trying to say is that.
You got 4 or 5 people behind you, they get limited. We have a hard stop.
Yeah, it's a hard stop.
You said 10:30, but you have people that haven't spoken.
Can we extend it if we want? I mean, we're not legally blind.
The school is the one that put a restriction on the time.
You got 10 minutes.
We got 5 people.
Well, is that there's a lot of assumptions there as far as people wanting to build.
We have to stop them all.
This is another one. You want to talk to me offline? I'll give you my number. Call me at my office.
I think the biggest point I'm trying to make is that I kind of doubt that people would want to continue to build houses here because the houses that are built are not selling. The new construction has had a lot of problems, and so we're making a lot of fears on the builder's remedy that they might not want to do because it might not make sense for them when you take out some of the other tax incentives of 100% affordable.
Brian Bailey, 201 Yvonne Way. Thank you for your time. I just want you guys to know, option A should be off the table. B and C we should look at and do something that's responsible. The first plan was not responsible. That was poor planning. But I do have faith you are looking into B and C, and we're going to do something with the land use board and create something that's feasible, it's not segregated, and it's inclusive. Because the first plan segregated, okay? Like I said, first meeting I saw you guys, I talked to you. This is your legacy. The kids' legacy, okay? The effect on this town is going to be A, B, or C. Just, choose wisely. And thank you for your time. I know you're working hard now to figure out a different option. But B and C should be it, A should be off the table. Thank you.
Hi, Andrea Sherlock, 204 Yvonne Way, SHERLAW. I've talked to people around the state about how they're handling it, and I agree. Everyone says, break it up, don't put it all in one spot. You guys seem to have a very, very high confidence if you agreed to, as Brian just said, Plan A with 144 units on a very dense piece of land, which happens to, yes, be right over my backyard. My question is, the way I understand it, the developer gets this land, right? They don't pay taxes for 30 years. They then hire a management company to control who comes in, right? Whether there's 9 people on a unit, right? Am I correct on that?
No, it all depends on rentals and condos. Condos, you have a stipulation.
Right, agreed. We're all fine with the way Revere is managed, right? I think we have said that from the beginning. My question is specific to the rentals. My understanding is if you look across the state, there's enough funding to get with management, and Mr. Brill, you mentioned it yourself. There's no incentive to these companies to go in and build the lower cost housing. So my question is, if we're representing the town residents' needs and everyone has a concern about control, why are we happy with a situation where someone takes the land, in charge of it, hires a management company, and the town has no control? What's our recourse if we do pick option A?
As part of option A or any municipally sponsored construction project, the municipality will enter into a developer's agreement with the developer. In that developer's agreement, it will explain roles and responsibilities of each party. Specific to your question, it will explain the requirements for the developer to undergo, I would just say generally good management practices, meaning ensuring that the units are not overcrowded, that there are not noise, criminal issues emanating from the municipality, or emanating from the project. And so that developer's agreement is going to outline the expectations of the town and the recourses, the actions, the options that this governing body has if the developer is not living up to its responsibilities. Additionally, as part of any developer selection for a municipally sponsored construction project, one of the things that this town, just like every other town, is going to ask for is, what is your track record? What other projects have you built, and what issues have arisen from those projects? Because the town is going to want the confidence that it's not selecting a developer that has a track record of creating problem communities across the state. Instead, they're going to want to select a developer that has a positive track record that can show references from other mayors and other community members from their projects around the state to show that they have a positive track record of creating projects that do not create negative impacts on the surrounding community. So there is a check, so there's an opportunity to vet the developer in advance of selection, and there's an opportunity to take action against the developer or the manager of the project if they're not living up to expectations that are A, common sense, but also outlined in the developer's agreement.
And so if there are complaints, are we calling the developer or do we call the town?
I would recommend that you let the township know that there are concerns, and what they're likely to do is then call the developer and say, hey, we have a problem, we're hearing from our residents, we need you to act in accordance to how we expect you to act based on our developer's agreement. And at that point, they would take the necessary action.
So I'm sorry, based on the level of confidence you've heard in the communication flow in this township, we have a partial time clerk, the door is locked most of the time. There's not really an active process, so I also want to understand what that communication flow would be before we would agree to this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the last question?
Yeah.
Hi, Elizabeth Gittins, 330 Greenwood Street, Gittins. I'm curious about the old school. This is the first time I'm coming to these meetings. I see that it had a TED, and I'm interested in finding out, is it something I heard from neighbors, possibility of senior housing? What's up with the old school?
So we included the old school as a potential affordable housing project. Right now, it was recently declared an area in need of redevelopment by the committee, and the next step with that would be to put it in a redevelopment plan, which is essentially zoning for the site. It would set forth how the units would be, how the building would be repurposed, how the site would be designed, and so forth. So that site may produce affordable housing. I think there's a hope that that site can take some of that 121 unit obligation. However, there's not that level of certainty yet that we're going to be able to achieve affordable housing, and that's why in that one table I showed in the presentation, you didn't see units allocated to that project. It's hoped, but not guaranteed, and that's because the project is small, and there's still a question about the economic feasibility to have that project developed. If and when it's confirmed that it's feasible to create those units, the township will request credit. But unfortunately, the timing of that is still a ways out that we're unable to anticipate with certainty that we're going to be able to gain credit for that project.
Any idea, with the historical significance of the building? I mean, I know it's probably low on the list. I went to elementary school there.
Yeah, it does have some historic significance. Once we do the redevelopment plan, at that point, we'll be able to flesh out, are we going to, I think there's hope to be able to retain the building, certainly, but we'll be able to flesh that out. We'll be able to identify any building improvements that may be necessary. So that's a good question, and that's part of the next step of the Township Committee's planning for the project.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we have no motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Anyone second it?
Aye.
All in favor? Paul seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks for coming, everyone.